report on the fire pension update. That is the issue that was brought to our attention last winter. We have a United Illuminating grant for $15,000, which I actually might take, since Mr. Bowman's here, it's a $15,000 item. We might just take that before the fire pension update to get that out of the way. Then we have a review of the town's pension and OPEB funds, and a review of the Board of Education financial position and the town's financial position. And then any other communications, of which I know of none at this point in time. Before I start, any questions, comments, concerns from any board members? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the minutes. Unfortunately, just due to the volume of them, we're going to have to take them separately in case somebody missed a meeting. I don't want to have someone vote on a meeting they weren't there. So if you'll bear with me, can I have a general motion to accept these minutes? And then I'm going to do to approve the minutes of the budget hearing of Board of Finance from March 19, 2013. Question, comments, concerns?
Yes.
Yes,
I have a
Mr.
proposed
Wall?
change.
Okay, Mr.
On the
Wall?
bottom of page 3, where it said that I recused myself, I'd like to add in, following where it says I recused myself, and he left the room during deliberations of these departmental budgets.
Okay, that's the change. Can I have a second of that? Mr. Bolito, questions, comments, concerns on the amendment? Okay, and so I'll just put the item before us as amended. All in favor of these minutes? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that item carries. To approve the minutes of the budget hearing of the Board of Finance from March 21st, 2013. Any questions, comments, concerns on these minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Item carries. Approve the minutes of the budget hearing of the Board of Finance from March 23rd, 2013. Questions,
21st
comments?
or the 23rd?
23rd.
There's 21st comes first.
I already did the 21st. I did the
Oh.
19th, I did the 21st, now we're at the 23rd.
Thought we just did one set of budget.
Nope,
We only did.
we did two.
I'd like to go back and amend the 21st. If
Oh.
we could have a motion to go back.
Do we have a motion to go back? I'll second that. All in favor to go back to the 21st? Opposed, abstentions, go ahead, go back to the 21st, Mr.
On page 3 and under the public comment of line 2480, the Center for Women and Children, there's a missing last name of one of the members of the public. The last name after Susan should be Schnitzer, Schnitzer.
Do I have a second for that change? I'll second it. Okay. The item as amended is now before us on March 21st. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, okay. We'll go to the 23rd. So to approve the minutes of the budget hearing of the Board of Finance for March 23rd. Questions, comments, Mr. Walsh?
These minutes do not contain, they're just a little bit different, the introduction of these minutes than the rest of the minutes. The members present don't have our first names, the Board of Selectmen's not listed, and also the members present. I would like someone to go back and make those changes.
Okay, can we hold this over then to another meeting? We'll go back on these minutes on the 23rd. Any comments or concerns on that? Can we move that to a date certain being our next monthly meeting to approve those minutes? Do it? Yes.
Members of the Board of Finance present were, members of the Board of Selectmen present were.
Yeah, Jim's questioning the form of it.
The form of it, and in all the other minutes presented during the budget season, if you also looked under who was also present, it would list people like Kevin Kiley, it would list the whole Board of Selectmen, usually under the term Board of Selectmen. It would list Mr. Mayor, it would list Ms. Bossy, it would list Ms. Gardner, it would list whoever was present for the rest of the evening, and it doesn't list any of that. And I'm just trying to get, I think that there should be a format that we follow in these minutes, and that should be the same for every minute, every meeting, especially during the budget season.
I agree. Does anybody else have any questions? So we move this to a date certain, which would be our next monthly meeting. Do I have a second to that motion? Mr. Stone? All in favor of moving the item March 23rd minutes to the next monthly meeting? Opposed? Abstentions? That item is moved. The minutes of the budget hearing of the Board of Finance of March 28th are now before us. Questions, comments, concerns on these minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of these minutes? Opposed? Abstentions?
Actually, just name is spelled wrong on the third page, you might want to correct.
That's fine, we can do that. Thanks. I'm not going to reopen it for that.
No, okay. Pledge of allegiance.
Yeah. To approve the minutes of the budget hearing of the Board of Finance from April 2nd, 2013. Any questions, comments, concerns on these minutes? Mr. Walsh?
This is more of a question, and maybe in my limited amount of time on this board. When we go into the discussion regarding each of the budget items, starting on the bottom of page 1, Board of Education, where we're on April 2nd.
April 2nd.
There's no commentary or minutes in regards to what anybody says about that, what any of the members say about it. I mean, I gave a fairly long reasoning for why I made a $2 million cut, a proposed $2 million cut that wasn't passed. Some of you gave reasons why you objected to it. There is nothing in these minutes that suggests that that there was any conversation regarding any of these budget items in the entire minutes. And I think that does a disservice to somebody looking back to know why we voted one way or didn't vote another way, or that we even talked about it. And I kind of think we need to go back and redo these minutes. That's just my comment.
Any other comments on these minutes? Mrs. Alban?
I agree with Mr. Walsh's concerns, and do we have perhaps different people who might have taken the minutes, therefore there's not a clear pattern for how they're done?
Mrs. Bossy, do you want to address that?
We basically have two people who take the minutes for the Board of Finance meeting, and they do kind of, one does one, and then the next one does the next one. So
Right,
yes, that's the
so
reasoning
because
for the
there are-
format changes.
There's clear differences in style from some of them, and so that's one point. And the second point is to Mr. Walsh's concern is an accurate reflection of what took place at the meeting. So perhaps between here and our next meeting, somebody could work with whomever's responsible for taking the minutes and then reproducing them to set up a more standard format.
Thank you. Mr. Prothero.
I think that Mr. Walsh's and Catherine's point is well taken, but I would add one comment that just came to my mind, which is that as opposed to, say, minutes that you'll go dig up from 5 years or 7 years ago, we now have videotapes of all these meetings that allow people to not only get a little tiny summary of what we might have said, but to actually listen to the entire thing. And it's extremely available through either the internet or at least on TV at some point. So I just would say, I'm not saying we shouldn't have it, but the real question is how detailed do you want to get, right? Because, I mean, you did make a very thoughtful and relatively, a couple-minute long discussion. You didn't just say, I want to cut, and that was the end of it. I don't really think you're going to capture what what you were trying to say in a sentence or two, unless you want these minutes to become 30 or 40 pages long, which is what it could become if we got. So anyway, it's just a counterpoint.
I don't know what to say. I mean, Mr. John, you want to comment before I comment? Go ahead.
No, I just had a question. How long do we keep the tapes of these minutes? Do we keep them forever?
Yeah, Jerry, do you know?
Well, yeah.
Use the mic, Jerry.
Please come up and introduce yourself.
Although I'm not on camera. Fair TV maintains a offline library. In other words, in separate storage, hard drive storage, and they go back all the way to when we first started. So we maintain a library as long as the disk drives don't disintegrate.
What about before Fair TV? Didn't we have it on tape? All the.
We have audio
Yeah,
tape.
so we still have it? Mm-hmm. Okay, and we're still, all right.
Okay.
Correct?
And how long do we keep those?
I don't know about the other two.
If Mr. Walsh wanted to go back 6 years or 7 years, would he be able to find what he needed?
Can we get an answer on the audio tape one? Because I think Mr. Brockfeld raises the exact concern that I have, and unless you're going to go a verbatim word by word, which I would tell you that this thing could become a 100 or 200 page document on a night like our vote night. where are you going to cut off? Is that exactly what they said? Are you paraphrasing? The minutes are supposed to be actually actions taken, not necessarily, the discussion of those actions taken. With the videotape, and if we have the audio tape, we have more than enough documentary evidence of what was done. That's just my thought versus how many hours are we going to burn doing, transcribing a 4-hour meeting and paying for it.
Well, also, well, I'm sorry, Jim. It'll also open up the person who's taking the minutes to having to boil down, because I don't think anybody wants a word-for-word transcript. So all of a sudden, a 5 or 6...
That's the paraphrasing, right, exactly.
Yeah, so a 5 or 6 minute presentation as to why someone is proposing a certain vote has to be boiled down to a paragraph by definition, or else the minutes
Or
would be-
less.
Or less, and then it becomes
But
totally...
that's a judgment call.
Then it becomes
It
a
is.
subjective thing, and then, anyway, just a, yeah.
It's a complete judgment call. It's something that, secretaries and clerks do all the time. I mean, if you look at
A lot
our
of
own,
times
if you look at our own RTM and the minutes that they keep, someone can give a soliloquy for an hour, but they reduce it to about 3 sentences about the main points that they make. And if we're going to get to the point where we're just going to say what the votes are, yeah, it'll be very easy to do the minutes. Matter of fact, we shouldn't even have to have a secretary sit here to do them. We can just say what the vote was. And not have really any minutes, and we'd reduce it to 1 page. But that's not what this board has traditionally done. I mean, if you look at, even on the one we're talking about, on page 4 of the current minutes we're talking about on April 30th,
So, Mr.
the
Walsh, what are you
financial position
proposing?
is on number 4, this is how long the minutes are. It's a page and a half of what Mr. Mayor said. But what I would suggest is that there be at least, if there's discussion by this body, on number 1, if there's members from the public, each of them should be listed, and a quick analysis, a quick 1 sentence, which we've been doing, says about what those minutes are. Same thing if a member says something. What was the main purpose of what they said? I think we just have to have some consistency of what we're doing in our minutes. And I also think that regardless of whether Fair TV, whether they're archived or not, which I think it's a great resource, and I think Jerry and his company do a great job, and I've often refer back to it myself, but you should be able to get 4 pages of what happened at a Board of Finance meeting and kind of quickly go through something to figure out what happened at that meeting.
Well, there also, you shouldn't use Fair TV, which is, quote-unquote, a third party as the official minutes. I mean, something
I know,
would
you
have to
can't.
be done.
Yeah.
Right. You'd have to actually go back to the audio tape. I'm okay with adding more detail to the minutes, but I don't want to get into the situation where we're sitting here parsing words for 3 hours over what a 4-hour meeting meant.
I think we might, can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
I wouldn't go so far as to say we should have a committee to necessarily look into this, but maybe a little offline thought on this, because I do see where Tom's going, and I can see a real problem. As it is, approving the minutes isn't a big deal here. Every now and then we have something like this that causes some conversation. But could you imagine if we had more like a 10 or 12-page document after every
Yep.
meeting and everybody says, wait a minute, I didn't really mean this, I was saying that, or this, you're taking me out of context, or you're only focusing on this, but I really wanted to say this. I think we could end up spending our entire meeting time debating the minutes themselves from previous meetings.
Now, that said, there is something to be said on that one particular meeting where we're voting on the budget for there be a bit more detail related to the reasoning. Because of it's basically the biggest meeting of the year. So particularly where there's large adjustments and there's votes, such as the Board of Education one or a couple of the others where there were adjustments made, I could understand having a few bullets underneath there regarding the individual members' comments and the reason for their vote. I can argue that for that meeting.
Can I?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just, because I don't know why I had a similar, Mary, I'll yield to you in 1 second. I had a similar, I don't know what other meeting it was, a town meeting of some sort, this kind of thing came up. The only problem I see, though, because I saw it happen once, was that there was some meeting I was involved with, some subcommittee or something, where a member decided, oh, I'm sorry, it was at the RTM, now I think about it, where a member decided that they didn't like the way their thoughts were written down, and they actually went as far as to write up their own paragraph and asked to have it inserted into the minutes. I really don't remember the details, but I remember this, and it turned into a huge brouhaha, and it obviously wasn't acceptable.
Right.
But I just think we're walking ourselves down a
I
dangerous
agree.
road in spite of the fact that I think Jim's concerns are appropriate, I'm just not sure the solution is going to
Right?
Well,
get you where you
I-
want
I-
Let me go back to Mary real
Okay.
quick,
Yeah.
because she might add something to
Well, I
this.
was going to say the same thing Tom had said, that this happens to be the budget meeting, which is a little bit different from all our other meetings. And I think a few comments on what our thought process were would be helpful, so we can refer to it year to year.
Right.
Because I often save the minutes and look through when we have something that repeats like that.
Thank you, Mary. And I'm going to go to Mrs. Albin, who was patient, and then go back to Mr. Walsh.
For the purpose of a very detailed history of a meeting, we have the audio tapes.
Correct.
And other boards use those audio tapes when they need to. The issue that I think Mr. Brackfeld's referring to, I've seen happen at the Board of Education, and they've struggled with this.
Yep.
And I think everybody has made very good points on this. Consistency as to how they're developed each month would be very helpful. And to Mr. Walsh's comment, and as we've all concurred, certain meetings need more detail. What I might suggest is, as the chairman, when you're reviewing the minutes before they come out to the board, that if you think they need more detail and they don't reflect that meeting well enough, that you might, before they
Sure.
come out, send them back for a rewrite.
Sure. Thank you. Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, and I concur totally with what Mr. Brockville was saying. I'm not looking to parse words or anything. I just think there should be just a little commentary. I've never really parsed words in any minutes I've ever been on the RTM, Board of Selectmen, or whatever. But I think there should be some like basic stuff down there. So that's really all I'm saying. I don't agree with parsing words. I've been on boards where people try to do that. I generally try to correct meetings if I've not been there and I was, if I said yes, and if I said yes and they put I said no, things like that.
Great, thank you. So let's do this. Let's bring these minutes back, ask for a little bit more detailed specifically around the votes where we change things, and any pertinent comments be added to the meetings. Flip them to me and we'll go through them. We'll also set up which we had in the past, actually a standard format. We'll make sure both of our clerks, that's been part of the problem, is we've had rotating clerks this time. Not clerks, rather, secretaries. My apologies. We've also rotated clerks. But we're having rotating secretaries, and there's a little bit of a difference in the form of the minutes. So we'll go through those. So with that, I'm going to ask that we were on the April 2nd minutes. I'm going to ask that we table these till our next meeting, or we move them to a date certain, which is our next monthly meeting. Do I have a second to that?
Second.
Mr. Walsh. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? They're moved. April 30th, any questions, comments, concerns on these minutes? Mr. Walsh?
One proposed change. In the members present, I was present at that meeting, and I'm not listed as either present or absent. And on the bottom of the first page, I actually abstained from a vote showing that I was there. So I would just like to be enclosed in the members present.
Okay, can you be more detailed on that, on the last one? Say it again, the last part?
No, and just to show that I was at the meeting, at the bottom of page 1, there's a vote where my name's used, so that I was there at
So
that
I'm going to
meeting.
ask that we review those minutes one more time for accuracy.
I just want my name added. I think the rest of the meeting, I was at the meeting, I thought they were accurate.
Yeah, I want to take a look at those if I can, so I'm going to pull those.
Okay.
Okay, let's go. Does anybody have a question? I'm going to pull those to date certain, which is our next meeting. Can I have a second to that, Mr. Bolito? Okay. All in favor of moving those minutes to the next meeting? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. And that was the 8th? Or wait a minute, what's that?
That was the 30th.
That's April 30th. Let's go
Yes.
to the 8th. My apologies. May 8th, any questions, comments, concerns on these minutes?
Ken apparently was here and not here at that meeting.
Yeah, exactly.
You.
Was that?
You were here.
Oh, wow.
And your name was spelled right, but you were absent.
Absent, your name was spelled wrong. I see that here as well.
That's right, absent is wrong. Apparently you have this one personality.
remarkable powers.
I actually had caught that one, so.
I don't know, was I here or not here is a good question. I'm going to abstain just to do that. Just to be careful.
We're going to move on, we're going to move those too. So let's move the 8th, and I'm going to move June 4th. We'll bring those back to the garage to take a look at those. That was funny, because I noticed that one too. All right. Any questions, comments, concerns? We're going to move, I move that we move the 8th and the 4th to the date certain, which is the next meeting. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? We're going to move those two. All right. And we're going to take item number 3 first. And that's United Illuminating Grant. Okay, to hear, consider, and act upon, the following resolution is requested by the Department of Public Works. Resolved, the first selectman is authorized to accept a grant from the United Illuminating Company in the amount of $15,000 from the company's Bright Ideas program. Further resolved that the first selectman be authorized to expend $15,000 towards the cost of the wireless energy management system for Independence Hall. And further resolved that the first selectman is authorized to execute on behalf of the town of Fairfield any and all necessary documents that facilitate the town's participation in United Illuminating's Bright Idea Grant Program. Mr. Bowman, welcome.
Thank you. This grant is really a continuation of all the work we've been doing on energy management and conservation over the last 15 years. And what it does is, it doesn't commit us, but it sort of makes us go forward and say, we will do our best to reduce our energy consumption by 20% by a date certain, which I think is 2018. And also we'll try and buy 20% of green power in that same time period. Well, that's not something that's going to be very hard to do. We're way up already in the 12 to 15% range in terms of energy savings. And our green power, I don't know how much the percentage is, but with the photovoltaic that we'll be bringing to you next month from the UI programs, by the end of next year, we'll be making 4.5 million kilowatt hours of green power. So that we're going to be well on our way to the 20% there also. Just as an aside, since 1996, we've reduced our electric usage by 26%. If you just look at the buildings that we had then, not looking at anything new ones, starting from that point, we have reduced it by 26%. And our heating, we've reduced the actual amount of BTUs used for heating by 52% in that period of time. So these are not unrealistic goals. I mean, things just keep going on and on. And what this does, we won the points, and then it's based on what households do, what businesses do, as well as what the town does. And if you're wondering what an energy dashboard is, it's really a control system for the heating and electric in a building, which allows us to control room by room what's going on in the building. Lights, heating, air conditioning, allows you to heat in one room and provide air conditioning in another room. It actually is true individual controls. It's in combination with changing some of the things in the ceiling, but without the controls, you can't do that. And this will control, if you wanted it to, it would control the alarm system. It controls almost everything. It's an amazing system. There's a whole bunch of them out there. We've chosen this one. We put it with a grant from UI and the sewage treatment plant, and it's worked amazingly well for the 3 or 4 months we've had it. So we chose to put this in Independence Hall, and maybe later we'll try and do it at the police station when we get things straightened out in the police station too. But anyway, that's some of the substance of it.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Questions on this item? Go to Mr. Bolito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Bowman. Quick question. In the bottom of page 1, it says, whereas participant will reduce energy consumption by annual Clean Energy Communities Program requirements, saying will reduce. And then it gives a schedule of what percentage reduction we as the participant are responsible for. What is the consequence if we don't meet these benchmarks?
Well, the consequence is we won't get another $15,000 grant.
Okay.
I mean, that's basically what it is. But remember, benchmark year can go back to the year 2008. And with the Board of Ed, we're trying to figure out what's the year that's best for us to start with.
Right.
Which would be the year we use the highest power. And once that's determined, then we'll go forward.
So, for example, fiscal year 17 calls for a 17% reduction. You believe that to be an attainable goal and not something that's too far out there?
Because we're already at least 10 to 12% there now.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Walsh?
And I think there's another great program that you've found. And I just want to thank you because you keep finding these ways for us to not only save energy, but even get grants for it. Anything from the LED program downtown to some of the other programs when I was on the Board of Selectmen. And it's extremely impressive that not only will the town's energy costs keep going down and the amount of energy that we are consuming continues to go down, but also that you're finding grants that are actually putting money in our pockets to be able to do so. So I just wanted to thank you, because I'm always impressed when you come before us with these programs. It's very impressive. Thank you.
Ms. Leclerc?
Okay. Is there a cost to the town?
No.
No. Is green energy more expensive than regular energy?
It usually is, but not always. It depends. Like a fuel cell would be more expensive. Photovoltaic is a little more expensive, but with the way we're doing it through, which you'll find out next month, is through these state programs, is we're not actually making the power, we're just buying the power at a reduced cost, so it's cheaper for us to buy the power. The companies get subsidized by UI to build the system, and then they sell power to us cheaper. So in this case, it will be cheaper.
Okay. And when do we receive the 15,000? Is it at the end, or?
No, it'll be as soon as we execute these agreements.
Okay.
So if we sign them, when the RTM approves them, it'll be, say, in October, we'll get the money.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Before I go on this, Mr. Tetra, is the conclusion been reached that the CPACE program doesn't need to come before the Board of Finance, and I don't think it does, right?
No, it doesn't.
I didn't think so. It just goes directly to the RTM.
Yes.
So, is that correct, Mr. Tetra?
Yes, we're going to bring it to the Board of Selectmen in September and then to the RTM in September.
Great. Since it doesn't come before here, can we just, and Mr. Walsh rightly gave you some kudos for all the work you've done on the energy. I'd like our board to hear a little bit from you, Mr. Bowman. If you don't mind, Mr. Tetra, feel free, on the CPACE program that you're bringing forward. And the reason I bring it up is one of the state organizations involved in this, I actually sit on the board of, which is the Clean Energy Finance and Investment Authority. And they're part of this program. They also have worked with the town. And I'd like to thank the town and the tax collector and Mr. Mayor for their work, and Mr. Bowman for their work on a CPACE program that won't come before us, but I think it's a real interesting thing for the town. So can you just briefly?
Yes. This is a program where the state provides low-interest loans to businesses and industrial properties, including multifamily housing, to do energy, management improvements such as we're doing. It could be just energy conservation projects, or it could be photovoltaic or fuel cells, or same kind of things that we're doing. And it provides those loans at a subsidized rate to them. It comes from the private sector loans, they're not state grants. And then the loan then stays with the property, not with the owner. So the owner, it's like a mortgage. It comes ahead of the mortgage, actually, on the property. And the town then collects that money and sends it to the state twice a year. So it's a program we had to work out very well. It's nice that it stays with the building rather than with the owner. So if he sells the building, the improvements stay with the building, and so does the mortgage, more or less. Again, but you do need the approval of the mortgage company, because it will come ahead of the mortgage on the tax, but not ahead of property taxes. That's the only thing that comes in favor of it. So it could be from anywhere from 5 to 20-year loans, which Connecticut is one of the first states to do this. But also Fairfield has been chosen and pushed because we have a lot of, comparatively a lot of older industrial and commercial properties, meaning 30, 40 years old, not 100 years old. So there's a lot of targets in this community for that kind of a program. And we've already, before we've even adopted it, we've got an interest in people who are looking for these loans. So I think it will be a successful program.
So in layman's terms, the way this works, okay, is that the state takes some funds and they partner with a private financial institution. And they partner then with the towns. And what the town agrees to do, and the town's role in it, is they actually agree to collect the funds through property taxes, through the same vehicle as the assessor's office, the tax collector's office, okay? So then the commercial developer or the commercial property owner goes in, does an energy audit, finds out that they can get the savings. They're approved based on that savings to get the loan, right? Then the loan is done at a very low interest rate, which makes the whole process very affordable for a commercial buildings, right? Because the risk of non-payment is nil, because they get behind the property tax, and it has the same effect as the property tax in terms of collection. So in other words, it gets paid off because it transfers with the property. So if that property is sold, if something happens, the loan gets in line right behind the property tax and gets paid off. So this was an innovative program that the state worked out along with the municipalities, and there's about 50 municipalities that approve this now. And it allows our commercial developers to actually put in green technologies in their buildings, lower the cost to their tenants, and attract more industry to town, more business to town. Correct?
Correct. And again, these energy loans can be part of a larger improvement program for the company, too. If they're, just restructuring their buildings, they can add this to it. So it's one of the only kind of programs like it for industrial and commercial properties.
So, and this needs the approval of the Board of Selectmen and the RTM for the tax collector to implement this, and it goes before them in September. So we'll never hear this, but with Mr. Bowman here and Mr. Tetra, I thought it was probably appropriate that we bring it up and just alert everybody to what's going on.
You explained it better than I did, so.
Well, believe me, I sat through a lot of meetings on it. So, thank you. So the item is before us. Do we have any more questions on this item before us? Okay, do I have a motion?
No, there's a motion. Okay.
First, do I have a second? A second. Okay, the item before us is the United Illuminating Grant to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as requested by the Department of Public Works. Resolved that the first selectman is authorized to accept a grant from the United Illuminating Company in the amount of $15,000 from the company's Bright Ideas program. And further resolved that the first selectman be authorized to expend the $15,000 towards the cost of a wireless energy management system for Independence Hall. And further resolved that the first selectman is authorized to execute on behalf of the town of Fairfield any and all necessary documents that facilitate the town's participation in United Illuminating's Bright Idea Grant Program. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The item carries. Thank you. And thank you once again for all your hard work. All right, so we're going to go back to item number 2, which is an update on the fire pension situation that was brought to our attention in December. We have the report, we have the response to the report, and we also have a document prepared by the administration that addresses a plethora of questions that this board put forth in the January timeframe and asked to be addressed. I want to thank the administration for putting together the answers to those questions, and I'd like to invite Mr. Trembecki up, and I don't know, Mr. First Selectman, are you going to be part of this or no? Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I also
Mr.
have the handout regarding the impact letter and the support for that.
I thought we, did we get that handed out earlier?
You just got the one sheet, you didn't get the,
Okay.
what I said.
Hold on to that for now, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you,
Welcome,
Mr. Chairman.
Trembecki.
Thank you. I don't know how you want to proceed. You have the report. I can sort of go through the highlights, and then I presume there'll be questions, and to the extent that I can answer them, I'll try my best.
That'd be great. I think that's the best way to go through it. Thank you.
All right, well, as you know, this process started with an anonymous letter that was sent to you, Mr. Chairman, concerning some, quote, secret deals that were taking place in the fire department with regard to promotions and pensions. And I think the letter is attached to my report, which prompted the inquiry by your board and the Board of Selectmen. I was asked to investigate these promotions and specifically given a charge to investigate any and all issues surrounding the retirement policies and procedures of the Fairfield Fire Department, including whether they have been implemented in accordance with the town charter, collective bargaining agreement between the town and the firefighters. Included within the investigation is to determine whether or not resources of the town and its pension plan have been misappropriated or improperly paid. In the course of my investigation, I spoke to a number of people they're all identified in the report. both town officials, firefighters, the fire chief and his council, and a number of the retirees. I was not given the authority to take depositions or things of that nature, but that said, I would tell you that everybody cooperated with one exception. Former Assistant Chief Chavanello initially spoke to him, indicated that he would talk to me, and then thought about it over the weekend and decided that he'd not talk. So there was nothing I could do to compel anybody to talk to me who didn't want to. In looking at the law, I mean, there are three general bodies of law which govern this: the Connecticut state statutes, which really don't provide very much information in helping us understand this. The town charter provides some guidance as to the roles of the first selectman and the fire commission, but those are general, and without getting into the detail, the fire commission has the sole responsibility, according to the town charter, to promote people within the department, with the exception of the fire chief. That's a different provision, but not something that we needed to deal with in connection with this investigation. The other relevant part of the town charter relates to the powers of the first selectman over the fire chief. And generally speaking, the fire chief reports to the first selectman on matters of administration and operation, and to the fire commission on matters of policy. The allegations, as you know, were that there were some secret agreements made between the fire chief and various members of the fire department to engage in promotions, and that these firefighters or officers would then retire and receive enhanced pension benefits. There is an exhibit which is attached to my report, Exhibit B, which was prepared, I believe, from the town, with the Town Human Resources Department, along with the assistance of Mr. Kiley, breaking out the numbers of firefighters which had job status changes in the last year of their tenure with the town. There were 9 of them, and of that group, 4 of the 9 were made provisional lieutenants a short time prior to their announced retirements, and then 3 of the group of 9 were promoted to provisional assistant chief and retired shortly thereafter. The remaining 2 retirees, Assistant Chiefs Chavanello and Curry, were laterally transferred, and then they retired. So in breaking this down, I looked at it as sort of 2 different categories, if you will: the provisional appointments and the lateral transfers. The other important document to keep in mind that bears tremendously on what happened is the collective bargaining agreement. And as Chief Fellner has stated to this body, to the Board of Selectmen, and to me personally, that in administering this process, he followed the collective bargaining agreement. There are a number of provisions in the agreement which are relevant, specifically the seniority provisions, minimum manpower, the acting positions, which is Article 19, promotions, Article 25, and overtime. And last, Appendix D, which is attached to my report as Exhibit C. I know it's a little confusing, but unfortunately that's how it fell in the alphabet. Talks about what happens when there's to be a lateral transfer, and that is spells out an example as to how that particular process is to take place. I think in order to understand this, there are some background facts that weigh on this. First of all, the members of the department, the chief, the union, and I can't say that every member of the fire department understands the contract as well as the chief and the union do, but certainly everybody understood what was in the contract and how it worked. Chief Fellner has been with the department for 54 years. He previously served as a union president, and there was a very clear understanding about how the contract worked and how these promotions would work and how they would impact pensions. There was also sort of I call it a perfect storm in the sense that there were a number of people who were in the category that they could retire. They had attained the requisite numbers of years of service and the requisite age so that they were, quote, retirement eligible. And what was said to me, not only by the chief, but the union leadership, and the retirees was that there was a sense that the next contract, this contract expired, I believe, on July 1st of 2013, that the next contract might not be so generous when it came to pensions and pension benefits. Now, there's no one can really say that with any certainty. I imagine the contract is being negotiated. I'm not privy to what's going on in those negotiations, but there was a general sense that if you were going to go, maybe this was the time to go if you had an opportunity, and everybody understood that. The other significant thing that played a role in this is that there was no retirement list in place. Apparently there was a test that had been scheduled for around the time that Hurricane Sandy hit.
Not retirement list.
Promotional list, sorry.
Yeah.
Promotional list. There was no test scheduled in the meantime. So that said, then there are different provisions of the contract as to how promotions are acted on, and it's generally by seniority as opposed to the promotional examination. Okay, so the provisional lieutenants. Essentially, you know, and this is I know it was one of the questions I spoke to Chairman Flynn about, is this question of whether acting and provisional mean the same thing. Well, the chief said that they did, and other people have said that they do, but according to the terms of the contract, they don't. An acting position is designed to be for a short-term illness. When you need X number of people on a shift, there's somebody who's out, someone needs to be placed be promoted into an acting position, but it's always deemed to be and considered to be a temporary position, so that when the person who is out comes back, that acting person will go back into their formerly lower position, if you will. Provisional, on the other hand, is a much different animal, and a provisional appointment now enables the provisionally appointed individual to be a, quote, officer or take the next level and accrue the salary and accrue the pension benefits, so that there is a distinction under the contract. And the way, so attached to my report as Exhibit D is sort of a timeline which was prepared by firefighter Thomas Pond, and sort of outlines how these, what I call the falling dominoes, took effect. And it started in October of 2011 when a Lieutenant Sanama went out on long-term injury leave. And at that point, and the position, according to the contract, is required to be left open for a minimum of 8 weeks. And during that 8-week period, various people who are in lower ranks are promoted into the acting position in order to get overtime. So that the work rules require that the position be open for a specified period of time before a provisional promotion can take place. And what happened was, as we went through the process, there were a number of these provisional appointments that were made by the chief, and it was management discretion to make those appointments, and those individuals retired. And those are, again, listed on, if you look at Exhibit B, you can see them listed, Lieutenant Kenny, Lieutenant Kudlicki, Al Manillo, David Jepson, Leonard Walksness, Wayne Garrison, I believe it's John Lakatos. So those appointments were made. Those individuals went out and retired at the enhanced benefits of the provisional appointment. Now, with regard to the lateral issue, the training officer transfers, which is discussed starting on page 11 of our report, the training officer position holds the rank of assistant chief. The job had been held by Assistant Chief Tracy since July of 2007 to September of 2012. The position comes with it's a steady day shift and has a higher base salary, also comes with a vehicle. According to Chief Tracy, who spoke with me with his union representative present, Assistant Chief Chavanello had approached him in early September asking if he wanted to go back on the line. Tracy indicated that he didn't want to. Shortly thereafter, he was approached by Chief Fellner and advised that he had discussed the transfer to a line position with the first selectman, but it wasn't going to happen. The first selectman, in fact, verifies that a conversation took place, but at this meeting, he indicated to Chief Fellner that he wasn't comfortable with this transfer taking place. September 10, 2012, Assistant Chief Tracy hears from the chief that the lateral transfer was being made and it had been approved by the first selectman, according to Assistant Chief Tracy. Both First Selectman Tetro and Mr. Mayer, as Chief of Staff, indicated that they did have a second meeting with the chief, but they were not being asked to approve this transfer. Rather, they were told that it was being made, and they said, you know, you're the chief, so, you know, you're free to do what you see fit in terms of running the department. And this is where there's a little bit of a factual conflict. There was a meeting on September 11th, 2012 at Chief Fellner's office. Chief Fellner indicated that this transfer was not going to take place unless there was an agreement. Present at the meeting were Chief Fellner, Assistant Chief Tracy, Assistant Chief Chavanello, and union representatives Lieutenants Smith and Tuttle. Long discussion at this meeting about moving Tracy back to a line officer position. Tracy indicated that he felt that he was being pressured to undertake this transfer. He indicated that if he was going to be moved, he wanted to go back into the position as soon as possible. Appendix D notes that if there's going to be a lateral transfer, it's to be for a period of 3 years. So again, if there was an agreement made to move Tracy out and then move him back in, it's not clear from the people who were at the meeting as to what exactly was agreed to or not. In any event, the upshot of this meeting was Chief Fellner was under the impression that there was an agreement by Tracy to move from the training officer position into a line position. Tracy, and there was a handshake, and Tracy either reluctantly accepted or changed his mind because his union reps called him shortly after the meeting to find out if, in fact, he had agreed to this. Because, of course, once the transfers start taking place, it's very difficult to undo them. Shortly after the meeting, Tracy comes back with an email, September 21, 2012, and tells the chief he wants to remain Assistant Chief Training and did not want to be transferred. Despite this disagreement, the transfer was made via email September 25, 2012, by Chief Fellner, effective September 26, 2012. Tracy expresses his displeasure, but goes along and obeys the chief's order. Assistant Chief Chavanello is put into the job, despite not being the most senior person on the seniority list, who was Assistant Chief Curry, and shortly thereafter retires. Assistant Chief Curry is then placed in the position. Shortly thereafter, he retires. Now, Assistant Chief Curry told me it was well known that he intended to retire. But going by the seniority list, he should have been the first person that would have been consulted to be given Tracy's position had Tracy been moved out. Other interesting thing, of course, is that Tracy filed a grievance contending that he had been moved out against his will. By Curry retiring, Tracy was put back in the position, and the grievance went away. There obviously was there's a factual dispute as to what happened. I wasn't there. There are a number of different versions as to what took place and whether it was done in accordance with an agreement or not. Clearly, the chief had the power under the contract to have made these transfers had he chosen to do so, but the claim was made that there was an agreement. I'm not sure that there was. And if there was, certainly it was revoked shortly after this, quote, agreement was reached. So I think, in trying to boil this all down and understand what happened, as I've said publicly before, and there was no direct evidence of a quid pro quo. By that I mean, not everybody got together. They didn't all get together and sit down and say, hey, let's figure out a way to scratch each other's backs and to promote everybody. I don't think that happened. But I don't think it needed to happen, quite honestly, because I think everybody understood the way the contract worked. Everybody understood the circumstances of this and how it would play out. Now, whether there was a conscious decision to try to promote people so that they would get enhanced pensions, I can't say that. I can't get into people's minds. But clearly everyone agrees there were no discussions about specifically giving people enhanced pension benefits. On the other hand, I would say that everybody understood what the circumstances were and how it would play out. So That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Trembecki. Questions from board members on this item? Mr. Trembecki?
None?
Mr. Walsh?
Good evening, Mr. Trembecki. Thanks for your work on this.
Thank you.
I think you did a great job in writing it up and summarizing a lot of the details, which were many. I was just a little confused in regards to the conversations that happened between the chief and the first selectman. Can you tell me what those were? Because, and also in your review, what are the duties between the first selectman and the chief?
Why don't we go backwards?
Because one of the questions I want you to answer along the way is, can the first selectman overrule the chief?
Well, I think, if you go to the charter, as it relates to promotions, the sole authority to make promotions rests in the fire commission. So to some degree, and the chief indicated that these things have been reported to the fire commission, these promotions. The minutes of the fire commission don't reveal any of that. Now, I understand that these things could have possibly been discussed in executive session. I suppose that's possible, but the minutes do not reflect any of that. So the answer to your question is the sole power to make promotions by the town charter rests with the fire commission. Going back to the chief's supervision, the charter is kind of split. It says that the fire chief shall report to the first selectman on matters of administration and operation, and to the fire commission on matters of policy. So the way I understand what happened was there was a first meeting where Chief Fellner went to Mr. Tetro and said that he wanted to make these transfers. Mr. Tetro indicated that he wasn't comfortable with it, or didn't feel that it was something that would be appropriate. Whether he needed to go to the first selectman or not, I suppose is, irrelevant, really. I mean, it's really the fire commission in terms of promotions. But Chief Fellner then made the decision that this lateral transfer was going to take place, went back and met with Mr. Mayor and Mr. Tetro, and at that point indicated that he intended to do it. And their response was, hey, you're the fire chief. You do what you see fit. You're running the department. So that's as best as I can understand it.
Did Mr. Mayor or Mr. Tetro state to you that they realized that there was going to be some type of financial consequence by this decision?
That wasn't discussed, no.
All right. Can either of those gentlemen opine about that?
The issue at the time was that, and the reason I wasn't comfortable with it when it was first presented, was it was represented that Assistant Chief Chavanello could quite possibly retire in 6 to 9 months. And that didn't seem to be enough time for me to be comfortable with making a move at that point.
Okay.
And just if I can, Chief Fellner indicated that when Chavanello was put into the position, he thought that he was going to stay in it for at least 3 months, and was surprised when Chavanello suddenly retired.
Thank you. Just based on the answer to the question, something dawned on me. So there was the initial meeting where Chief said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, right? And Mr. First Selectman, your response was, hey, really not comfortable with that. He's going to retire in 6 to 9 months. That doesn't seem like a wise move from where you're sitting. What changed between that first meeting and when he came back to you and said, basically you had a meeting, he said, here's my idea, and you said, I'm not happy with that idea, I really don't like it for whatever reason, here's my reason, he's going to retire in 6 to 9 months, right? What changed between that meeting and the next meeting where you kind of sat back and said, okay, you're the chief, do what you think is right, or whatever?
Simply put, the chief in the second meeting said, I'm doing this on my authority, and I feel I need to do it for the good of the department.
Okay, so it wasn't a request anymore, it was I'm doing this, and you felt that you couldn't say no to that?
From a public safety standpoint, if the chief says he needs to do it for the good of the department, I'm going to support that move.
And Mr. Mayor, did you do an economic analysis on it? Thank you, Mr. Tetra. Did you do any, were you thinking this is going to have any other implications other than this is just a staff move?
I certainly had no forward thought processes about, one person going in, another person going in, another person going in, and a snowballing effect, because I did not then have the, the understanding, the information of how many people were ready for retirement, et cetera, or the attitude of the department, the things that Mr. Tembeck has talked about. I think we both knew that it would impact, one person's pension plan. We both knew that doing that I thought, and agreed with, in the first meeting with the first selectman, that doing this on a short-term basis like this, though the chief did provide reasons for doing so, I just didn't think it was, that it made sense on the face. But as the first selectman indicated, when the chief came back to the second meeting, he made more elaborate, he had a more elaborate discussion, more detailed discussion about his reasons and why he felt it was the appropriate action for the betterment of the department.
Any follow-ups?
And the only thing, I do remember the chief coming before this body and saying that Mr. Chavanello, and I don't know whether this was explored, because you obviously, he did not speak to you, correct?
Other than, no, I spoke to him initially. He said, I told him what I was doing, why I wanted to talk to him. He said, look, I want to think about it. It was a late Friday, and he said, look, I'll call you back on Monday. I called him on Monday, said, I words to the effect that, I have nothing to be gained. There's nothing for me to gain in talking to you, essentially, so.
Okay, because I think the chief had mentioned at a previous meeting that, at least with Chavanello, that there was some personal issue that might have come up. So we have no idea why he retired, correct?
I personally don't.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
The one that I just want to ask you a question about, Alex, is that one's not as big one to me as the Curry one, because he takes a position and retires the next day. And he claims one of the reasons he stated was because he did not want, he knew about the grievance and did not want that to go through.
Yeah, I think his concern was, he stated to me, well, I'd been in the department a long time. I saw that we had a good contract. I thought it was going to get trimmed back in the next round. So, yeah, I was going to go. That when the grievance was filed, his concern was, well, geez, if Tracy's right and he gets put back in the job, well, I'm going to get bumped out of the position again. So another reason for me to retire while I'm an assistant chief as opposed to getting bumped down. So if Tracy wins the grievance, he loses.
No, and I understand that, but, and I guess this has nothing to do with the chief or the decision that was made. The guy had to know that the grievance was there before he accepted the position. So he accepts the position one day, and it's okay to do that. And then the next day, he submits despite the fact of knowing the grievance, retires the next day.
Yeah, I don't know whether he, you're right, you make a good point.
I don't know the facts. That's what your report seemed to suggest, that he
Yeah.
retired the very next day.
Yeah, and I think what his explanation to me was, because one of the things that I heard in listening to the chief's testimony versus the DVD was that back when he testified to your body back in January, was that the idea was it would solve the grievance. Well, that's not really accurate. It did by default, but I don't think anybody said, well, geez, if you retire, you'll help me get rid of this grievance. Curry was looking out for his own interests. And I think what he said to me was, well, as I thought about it, the more I thought about it, if he wins, I lose.
Overnight.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it was overnight. He told me that his intention to retire was well known.
No, I'm talking about accepting
Yeah,
the position,
yeah.
but then retiring the next day.
Yep.
I mean, it just makes it look bad, and it doesn't have anything to do with the chief. It's just that decision process with him concerns me and confuses me, that you can accept it it just makes it seem as though you accepted it just to take the more money, and then the next day, he did that. And it just makes everybody in the process, because of his decision, not look, you know.
I would, and again, I go back to my comments earlier that, again, there was no direct evidence of people getting together and colluding. On the other hand, everybody understood how the contract worked.
Yeah. And I'm not saying anybody colluded. I want to be very clear about that. I don't think there's any collusion at all, but I just think the mindset of being a 24-hour difference between accepting a position, retiring from the position for that individual looks strange.
I don't disagree.
Mr. Brockfeld?
Thank you. Thank you for the report.
No problem.
And the presentation. I guess before I have a question for you, or is a bit of a comment, which is that listening to this, and of course, I can't remember exactly, Tom, when this first came up, but it's been quite a while, obviously. Yes, so, we talked about it, there was a lot of heated discussion, and then, of course, we got into other issues, the budget and so forth, so now it's actually forcing us to, bring back some memories here and so forth, so thanks for the report. I guess the first comment I have is that, our job here on the Board of Finance is to represent the taxpayers, obviously, and to look out for their financial interests. So I would say that my first comment out loud is that this contract, or any contracts that are structured like this, are terribly unfair to the taxpayer. That's a comment. That's my opinion. People could disagree. But any contract that allows, it's almost unimaginable as someone who's worked in the private sector, and I do not deny in any way, shape, or form our public servants good pay and good benefits. But for anybody to be able to move into a position and retire the next day with a elevated pension as if they did something for that one day that makes them deserve the elevated pension. Again, I know the contract allows it, but I'm just saying, in other words, the negotiation of the contract in of itself is an insult to the taxpayers. That's a generic statement. And I'm sure it's been going on for a long time, and I don't know if it's being addressed in future contracts. So I hope it is. What I'm a little upset about, or a little concerned, and this is bringing back a lot of, reading your report and listening to the comments, Mr. Walsh, is that, and I guess I don't think we're bringing the chief up here for presence. I'm not even trying to intend to. I'm just saying that, but this refers to the chief a bit, is that what makes me feel that this was clearly if not collusion, a organized effort to get these extra benefits, is that if we knew that this fellow Tracy was not happy with this move, what was the rush in moving him so quickly and then putting somebody in there, having him retire 9 days later, and then putting another guy in there and having him retire a day later? In other words, what was the why? I understand he was supposed to get more experience. That was the reason. But couldn't we have waited? Couldn't there have been a week or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 weeks taken to examine why he was upset, if he was going to possibly file a grievance, and so forth and so on? What was the hurry? I don't know if you ever explored that angle.
I don't really, I can't answer that because I wasn't there. The only thing I can tell you is what I was able to investigate and determine in talking to the people who were involved. I think on the one hand, you have the chief who felt that there had been an agreement reached. Tracy, who expressed to me that he felt that he was pressured to agree, and he didn't believe he agreed, but acknowledged having shook hands with the union reps the next night, calling him saying, hey, are you agreeing to this or not? And then him sending a formal email saying, I don't agree to this, and it's all in this time frame. And then after he revokes his, let's assume he agreed. Right. He revokes his agreement, and at that point he's still transferred nonetheless, which the chief has the power to do under the contract. And then he grieves it. So I don't know how the grievance would have come out. You ask good questions, but I just don't know the answer to those questions because I wasn't privy to what the thought process was.
But you didn't ask those questions?
Well,
I don't know. I don't even know what your exact charge was here, to tell you the truth. I don't mean to criticize, but I feel like this is more of a simple recitation of the facts, as opposed, there's no conclusions here, as far as I could tell.
Well, I think the conclusions that you can draw are twofold. One is there's a lot of circumstantial evidence here, which I think shows that people understood what the deal was. And that, there were some statements made to me that this is standard practice. These were practices that have always happened in the fire department in the past, so that this is nothing unusual, if you will. As to why it was done the way it was done, I can only tell you what people said to me. As to what, I can't get inside the chief's head. I can only tell you what he said to me. As to, why it was done the way it was done, I mean, I kind of think you have to draw your own conclusions.
And the last thing I'll say, and then I think Mr. Bolito's waiting, is that, I find that, we talk about this at the table a lot and among ourselves, those of us who are serving in political office in the town. It's a town of 58,000 residents or so. Some of them are kids, so maybe 30-odd thousand voters, 35, I don't know the number. And, we like to say things like, oh, we're getting a lot of comment from constituents and stuff like that, and maybe sometimes it's exaggerated. I can tell you with all honesty that in my years serving, I was on the pension board before this, I'm now on the Board of Finance, I think this is my 5th year. I've never had more heated comments directed at me than on any issue other than this issue. This touched a tremendous chord within the public. And again, I'm not going to say I talked to 20,000 people, but more than a token number who know I'm involved came to me and said that something is terribly wrong with what happened here. And ironically, most people were not actually angry at the fire department. It was actually anger at our officials who would allow us to have a and these contracts go back years, so I don't know where it all comes from, but it's not recent, I know that. But that this could even be in a position where these kind of machinations could take place.
And I think, my charge was not to come up with recommendations of what I thought needed to be done. That was not what I was asked to do. But I will tell you that when you read the contract and spend some time trying to understand it and understand the way it's written, what happened here is authorized under the contract. So that
I know from day one.
I mean, I think if there's going to be a change made, obviously it needs to happen somehow at the negotiating table somewhere. But that wasn't what I was asked to do.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to go to Mr. Brown and then Mr. Bolito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question about the grievance itself. You said that the chief had the authority to transfer Mr. Tracy. So where does the grievance come in? If the authority's there, what's to grieve?
Well, because it's a good point, but the actual grievance, and I can read the language in it, that he was removed against his will from the position of assistant chief training. Now, I think the grievance was never fought out, if you will. It was never litigated. I think that there's provision in the contract for the chief to have just administratively made this happen. That's not what he said he did, and I don't know what their thought process was as to how they were going to defend it, because it never got that far.
Right.
Once Curry retired, the whole thing, Tracy withdrew the grievance. Right. So.
And Mr. Curry was, well, I guess he was very cautious. He was nervous enough that he just retired instead of having the grievance go through, or to see the results of the grievance. Right, as you
That was
said.
part of what he told me as to why he retired.
Yeah, just, I don't understand why there was that concern if the chief has the authority to transfer Mr. Tracy per the contract. Well, the contract's the contract.
Yeah, and I think it just, because once Curry retired, then Tracy withdrew the grievance, so it just.
So we'll never know.
So we'll never know, I guess, is the answer.
And just the last point, without repeating everything Mr. Bradfeld said, I mean, there's an obvious loophole in this contract that definitely needs to be addressed. I mean, we understand the pensions. Someone's there, he was 54 years old, I believe. He's there for 30-something years. I don't think anybody has an issue with the pension. The issue is to get a higher pension after being 1 day on the job, even 9 days on a job. Because as you said, he didn't do the job. You don't do the job in 24 hours. So hopefully when just general comment, when the negotiations start and whoever's involved addresses this issue, because it needs to be addressed.
When I did address the Fire Commission about this issue, and one of their resolutions was to make that there be sort of a, a 6-month period before anybody could retire, and but again, that's subject to negotiations. I don't know how that's going or
Just
what's
some time
involved.
period. Again, no one argues about the pension or the benefits. I mean, we get that. It's just you have to earn them in that position, and you don't earn them in that position in one day. 6 months, if that's the time, whatever they come up with, but hopefully it's going to be addressed. Thank you.
Go to Mr. Bolito real quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Attorney Trembicki. A couple of questions for you on page 16 of your report. You say in the first paragraph, Chief Fellner, in putting Assistant Chief Chavanello into the position, that being the fire training position, he ignored the seniority list, which would have required that Assistant Chief Curry be offered the position. That wasn't done. The CBA was not followed in this respect. Then in the last paragraph, you say, technically, the provisional appointments complied with the verbiage and the contract. So my question to you is, on one hand, you're saying the CBA was not followed with respect to the promotion of Chavanello,
The laterals.
the lateral transfer, so that's different and apart from the provisional appointments.
Correct.
Okay. The fact that the CBA was not followed with respect to the Chavanello transfer, does that fact give the town any legal recourse to void that pension?
I wasn't asked to look into that. I don't know. I don't have an opinion on that one way or the other.
Okay. Now, as to the second thing, but for the chief's voluntary management decisions, these events would not have occurred. You mentioned that everybody knew what the contract said and how the game was set up, so to speak. You say that he did not have any requirement to make these...
Just on the provisionals. we're
Right,
talking
on the
about.
provisionals,
Yeah.
understood. The chief did not have any requirement that he do this. My question to you is, was there anything in the contract, as you read it, that would have prohibited expressly the chief from making these provisional appointments?
No, these were voluntary decisions. I know there was some testimony before you about filling the positions with overtime, and that, you have to pay overtime when you have someone who's not quote-unquote promoted. I don't know that there was any analysis, financial analysis done about which was cheaper. I just don't know. I don't think there was. Again, I think these were voluntary management decisions that did not have to be done. It's that simple.
So basically, because the contract didn't specifically address it,
Didn't require it.
didn't require it, the chief could act in his discretion to manage as he saw fit.
As it relates to that,
Right,
yes.
understood, understood. So it seemed that going forward, again, echoing what Mr. Brown said, that the way to prevent this from happening again, which is, I think, what we're all concerned with, is to negotiate the upcoming contract to specifically address this.
I would say, and again, I just, this is my first time sort of going through this contract in tremendous detail. I think that there are a lot of issues in the contract that enable these kinds of things to happen. And it's not so much, we kept a wage increase to X. I think the work rules are the issues that, and I'm sure our town council, whoever our negotiating group is addressing these things. I'm not privy to it, but I think that those are the work rules that are the issues.
One last question for you. You mentioned, and we were aware that the Fire Commission basically put a, I guess you call it an abeyance on any further promotions being done. Was it for a 6-month period?
I don't know the details of that. I know it happened after these events.
Right. My question is, does the Fire Commission have that authority given what's in the CBA?
I think that's been grieved, and I think I'd probably, I don't know, and I'd probably best not say anything about it.
Understood. All right, thank you.
Mary? Mrs. Leclerc?
A few things.
Sure.
I was wondering if you could explain again to us the difference between a regular promotion and a provisional promotion. Is
Well-
there a difference in the process?
Well, a regular promotion is, typically there would be a promotional list, and a regular promotion would be there's a vacancy, someone retires, quits, whatever, and the position needs to be filled. The provisional appointments are different in the sense that it's after there's someone who's out on leave for, in the case of the assistant, the lieutenants, for 8 weeks. An assistant chief, you don't have to wait the 8 weeks, and someone can be put into as a provisional. and they accrue all the benefits of that new position, but it's not a permanent appointment, so that when the person who's out comes back, they go back down into the other job.
Okay, but so were these provisional promotions that they would have went back if the person came back?
Yeah, when the person came back, they would have to go back, but what they did is, once they were provisionally promoted,
They retired.
they got the higher salary, the higher pension benefit, and retired.
So I guess my question is, do we have, like, internal control issues in that, like, for a provisional promotion, one person can choose to do that, and there's no looking at, like, payroll and salary and benefits and what the effect would be? And approval of other, like the fire commission or the first selectman?
Presumably, the chief, as the manager of the department, would know what those increased salaries are, or human resources, or somebody. It's simple math. But as to whether, again, the town charter says that promotions shall be governed by the fire commission. And the fire commission, at least according to the minutes I saw, had no information about this. Now, it is possible they were discussed in executive session, but I just don't know that.
Okay, and they didn't confirm whether they knew in advance or?
When I went to the fire commission, the chief said that these things had been discussed. Chairman Popolowski told me they hadn't been discussed, these provisional appointments. So, again, I can only go by what the record is, and the record is that these things weren't. Now, the chief says that they were. I mean, I'm sorry, I wasn't at all these meetings, so I just, I can't tell you. It would seem to me that I know that this board and many of the boards in town do things very formally, and something like that would show up in the minutes, but I can't speak to why the
All
minutes were
evidence
kept
to the
the way.
contrary from our minutes this evening.
I always thought that you do discuss personnel issues in
Executive session, yes.
But then you would come out of executive session to vote or approve something.
That would be my thought as well, but I didn't see that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mrs. Albin? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. DeWitt, I didn't see. Mrs. Albin, do you have something quick? Okay, please. Thank you, Mrs. Albin.
Thank you, welcome. Frankly, reading this, not too surprised at the overall outcome here. But I'm a little confused, because I think you made a statement before that the fire commission, I don't know your exact wording, but had control or had knowledge or oversight on promotions.
By the town charter, the fire commission is the body that's to approve promotions.
So you've quoted the town charter, and
Yeah.
that's kind of where my
I can give it to you. It says the sole power to appoint and promote to all positions in the department. And it's subject, the fire chief's a little different, but everybody else.
Right. Because your statement here is that the fire chief shall report to the first selectman on matters of administration and operation, which would seem to be promotions to me, and to the fire commission on matters of policy. So promotions is a policy and not an administrative or administration?
Well, the only thing I would say is that the charter, to the extent that it gives the fire commission sole power over promotions, if you're trying to read these things consistently, that's really where the power lies, not with the first selectman.
Okay. My other point, probably more than anything else, is at the back of this report, if you read, there's a response from Attorney Saxel on behalf of Chief Fellner. I think that's accurate, the way I said that. And frankly, Chief Saxel is the only one that came to conclusions, which I kind of liked. And and I'll quote, "It's clear that town bodies have the capacity to change this process. As it's been said here, first, the appropriate language in the CBA can be modified. But secondly, pursuant to the town charter, the fire commission can mandate stricter oversight. Thirdly, pursuant to the town charter, the first selectman can also take a more active role." So I guess my question maybe for the administration is, so how do we not let this happen again, right? We always have these reports, we come to conclusions, now we're kind of where we are. How do we make sure that we're going to solve this, and the next round of people, whether it be anyone at this table or anyone out there negotiating the next contract, remembers this and makes sure there's some stipulation that can't be promoted in the last 3 months of service? or some law like that, some ruling.
I think there are two initiatives underway on that. One, immediately back in January, the Fire Commission has taken a more active role in promotions and provisional promotions, and I think formalized the communication with the chief to make sure there's not the miscommunication or the lack of documentation there has been on this. The second piece has been pointed out. There are a number of clarifications that can be made in the contract to make sure that this type of situation doesn't occur again.
Okay, great. Glad we have a plan.
Okay, any other questions? All right. Ms. Albin, I'm sorry, you did.
I think it's largely been covered. I think that knowing that the appropriate people in the town responsible for looking at contracts will be looking at this contract very closely for the language, that is a step in the right direction. I think, and Attorney Trembecki said it earlier, I believe we had a contract that created, and we had the stars aligned for this to happen with people that were approaching retirement, and it's come to our attention, and it's an unfortunate situation, but I do think, and I feel comfortable, that given all the publicity that this has received, that the people responsible for negotiating this next contract will see that better language is in there in the future.
Anybody else? All right. Chief, I know you're here with counsel. Do you have anything you'd like to say? I want to,
Yes, we do.
please. Thank you, Mr. Trembecki. Thank you for your
Thank
good
you.
work.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here this evening.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Richard Saxel. I am representing Chief Fellner. And what I have, for those of you who may not have downloaded, is copies of my report. And I've also made excerpts out of the charter relating to both the Fire Commission and the Fire Chief. It's all in one place, so you can take a look at it.
Now, we do have copies of your report. It
I
was part of our
understand.
minutes.
I understand it was there. I don't know if people, it sounded people had not read it based on the fact that one of the exhibits is Mr. Curry, A.C. Curry, saying, you know, it actually wasn't one day, it was 12 days. So for what it's worth, here's charter, and here's report for those of you who don't have it. I was going to start with what Mr. DeWitt sort of came in with, which is the recommendations, because I thought, okay, something bad happened, how do we make it better going forward? And then I also received the Fire Department personnel status change questions from the Board of Finance, which I was able to get this afternoon. I did not know that you had submitted questions. I don't know who answered them. There are a couple of things that are worth commenting in there, as far as I'm concerned. I'm just going to begin by elaborating on my recommendations, which are on page 9. First, the appropriate language in the collective bargaining agreement can be modified. And then keying into that is the third question from the Board of Finance. Was the contract language relied upon to authorize such promotions the subject of negotiation during the collective bargaining process? If so, why was this language not removed from the contract? If not, why not? Answer, it was not covered in the most recent contract update ending June 30th, 2013, due to a letter of agreement signed by the union and the prior administration limiting the issues subject to arbitration. Okay, folks, that was my negotiation. So I can tell you about that negotiation, and it was a little bit more than what you see here. It was on the table. Mr. Bolito was part of our negotiating team. And it was one of the things we asked for. It wasn't 6 months, it was 18 months that you had to be in place. How did we know we needed to do that? Well, gee, I asked the chief and I asked the deputy what changes they wanted in the contract. I asked, obviously, Mr. Flato what he wanted in the contract. I obviously talked with Mary Merrilees, who understands this very well. I talked to, I'm aware of Mr. Brackfeld's position on retirements. I had heard that time and again, and we'll come back to that in just a second. I also spoke to the majority and minority leaders in the RTM. I tried as best I could to find out what were of concern to people. This was way down on the list. And when you negotiate and you've got 20 things or 30 things, and they've got 20 things or 30 things, you know, you horse trade some of it. Nobody was concerned about it. Why was nobody concerned about it? Because this hadn't happened yet. You know, we're closing the barn gate after the horse is out, or after the firemen are out, or whatever. That's why that didn't happen. We had a contract, and the contract would have been approved, it would have been ratified, but Mr. Flynn went and talked to the Republican caucus at the RTM. Mr. Brackfeld went and talked to the Democratic caucus at the RTM, and what had been approved in committee on a 24-2 to 1 vote all of a sudden was turned down by the RTM, which is why we had all of Part 2 of this. Would we have gotten what we wanted? I don't know. But that gives you some of the background, and I think, I'm not doing this to make accusations at anybody, and I don't think, by the way, that the idea of what's happening here is in any way inappropriate. I think that these things do need to be tightened up. Negotiations, and I probably negotiated each of the town contracts maybe 3 times at a minimum, it's give and take. You can't get what you want. And what was said at the RTM by then the current selectman is, it's the best that we could do under the circumstances. And that's the way she voted. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way. And yes, there were changes made in negotiation, and Mr. Flato decided he wanted to enter into an agreement which would limit the arbitration because he was concerned about the cost of the arbitration. Was this negotiated? No. Did we attempt to negotiate it? Yes. Sometimes you get what you want in these, and sometimes you don't. But I thought that rather than just a glib answer, we hadn't tried. No, we did try. We didn't get it. And then the contract got shot down, for good, for bad, basically by your intervention. Even though you didn't have a vote, that's why it got shot down.
So you know what was said in the individual caucuses?
I attended one.
You didn't,
And I was told
you didn't attend the other one, did you?
Are you going to tell me that I made a misstatement, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Okay. Then you're free to have whatever opinion you want. Would you tell me why all the Republicans changed their vote?
No.
Would you tell me why everybody, the only issue that was talked about was this particular issue, Mr. Chairman? It was this issue. This is
What
why
issue?
it was over the retirements. It was over exactly what this was.
It's over promotions?
No, it was over retirements. It was over pension.
Okay.
Isn't that right? Isn't that factually accurate? I mean, I'm not trying to cross-examine you. That's what happened. I was there that night. You were there. That's what happened.
Right, and you're making assumptions.
I've been told. So excuse
You
me.
were told incorrectly.
And then I apologize. It's the best
Thank you.
information I have.
Can I say one thing, if you don't?
Yeah.
Because Mr. Sachs also referenced me, for what it's worth. This is going back in history, and I don't want to go off topic, but I do think, because I do remember fairly well the night you're referring to, and I did get up and I spoke at the RTM, and I said I didn't think the contract was a good contract. And it was over retirements, but to be very clear, we're here talking about something very specific about what could be called abuse of the language of the contract.
I understand.
What I was referring to, I'm speaking for myself, not for Mr. Flynn, although I think he felt the same way, by the way, was referring to the fact that we were uncomfortable with the fact that changes hadn't been made to the nature of the pensions in town regarding 401K style plans and so forth.
Yes, that's right.
It had nothing, I mean, the truth is that, and I think this is important because you brought it up, until this issue came up, until Mr. Flynn brought this issue to our attention through the letter you received and all the appropriate ways that you handled it, I thought, I couldn't have discussed promotions or provisional promotions or lateral promotions.
I guess that's right. It was a while ago.
Yeah.
It was over, what I wanted to say is
to be
we
fair,
did have.
it had
we
nothing to
did
do with
have-
this issue whatsoever. I think we should make the
That
record
is not this
straight.
issue.
Right. Okay.
I didn't mean to imply that it was this issue.
That's what you did.
I apologize then. So where are we? I'm trying to get a suggestion on how this could be corrected going forward. And again, it's part of a negotiation process. It's a difficult process. I don't think that the administration was wrong in the tack that it took. I think it probably needs to be done. Having said that, having negotiated with all 7 unions multiple occasions, I can tell you that the fire union understands the contract better than anybody else. When they know that we, the administration, the prior administration, had put this on the table, an 18-month hiatus. They'd already negotiated it down. They know that the contract was shot down by the RTM over retirement, and they knew that there was going to be nothing that was going to happen except that their benefits were going to be taken away. That was what Mr. Trembicki called the perfect storm. That and the fact that there was no promotion list. The dominoes, as he said, they all began to fall. I can talk about the specifics of what happened with Mr. Tracy. I don't know if you want to hear about it again. There's obviously a different opinion. There were 5 people in the room. Every one of them came to the same conclusion, at least at the time of the meeting. At that time, the chief made a lawful order. It takes a while. When you create lists, since people sometimes do days and sometimes do nights, you need to do it in advance. That's when the lawful order went in place. That's when A.C. Tracy was moved to the front line. There's precedent for moving upper echelons around. There's a reason to do that. Chief Sandbrook did that with his 4 captains. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but he had 4 captains, and he decided, fine, I'm going to switch them around. I want them to learn different parts of the department. And what happened is you had Chief Peck, who was in charge of about 70% of the department dealing with personnel, and everything worked fine there. And then he was switched over to ECC, very small part of the department. There were 7 or 8 grievances that were pending at that time. Chief Peck resolved them within a matter of about 3 weeks. On the other hand, the former captain who was dealing with ECC got moved over to patrol, obviously didn't handle it very well, and at the end of the day, we had 5 or 6 municipal prohibited practices. What did that tell people about who could manage the thing? Who could manage the department? Who could manage the people there? Chief Peck became chief after that, and that's maybe one of the reasons why that showed it. So it makes sense from the position of...
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Discussing the performance of police officers when they're not here, when that's not on the agenda, I would ask you to reconsider whether that's a live discussion topic.
I'm
Thank you,
finished with
Mr.
that. I
Tucker.
have nothing further. I'm saying there was a reason for this to happen. There is a management reason for it to happen, and that's why it did happen. And you can draw your own conclusions about what happened with taking the chief's position, what A.C. Tracy said at one point, and then what happened shortly thereafter. I want to address the fact of the promotion and why Tracy, when he moved out, why he was not replaced by Curry. Mr. Curry was aware of what happened. He did not go forward. He did not act at that time. Everybody knew, again, this is in the department, people knew what happened. They knew why. Chavanello was put in there. What happened with Chavanello? He planned to be there for a good number of months. As you may know, a lot of people retired just about on or about April 1st, because that's when they thought they were going to lose benefits with the new contract. Unfortunately, with Mr. Chavanello, things happened in his life, and unexpectedly he retired. At that point, Curry went to the chief and said, look, I have seniority, and he did. Put me in there. He was put in there, and not one day, but I guess 12 days later, he had to deal with the fact that he could lose what he had. Why shouldn't he take the sure thing? And at that point, he retired. I think that's what happened with that. I think this was unfortunate. I think there are other things that I suggest need to be done. The second thing was the Fire Commission mandating a stricter oversight. That's been done. It's clearly that's happened already as a result of this. The third thing, I thought the first selectman could take a more active role in the process. You can take a look and you can read again at 9.22D, supervision. The chief shall report to the first selectman on matters of administration and operation, and to the Fire Commission on matters of policy, as Mr. DeWitt said, of promotions. What do they fall under? And probably under the contract, they really do fall under the Fire Commission. But the chief went not once, but twice to talk to the first selectman. At the end of the day, what did the first selectman say? He said, well, you're the chief, you run the department. What was the advantage to the chief of running his department? He's been very limited on his budgets. He's had I don't know if you would know this better than I don't think his budget has increased very much over the last several budgets. What is he trying to worry about? He's trying to worry about and control what's going on with his department. Is it cheaper to have people on overtime, or is it cheaper to promote people? It's cheaper to promote people. That's why he did what he did. He was trying to deal with a part of the budget that he could deal with. That's why he did what he did.
Do we have that economic analysis that was done to show that, when the decision was
You can
made?
talk to the chief about it.
Do we have that?
Yeah, I think on the budget-wise, and I think Mr. Mayor can answer that. I believe we saved, budget-wise, I'm talking, not pension, by about, what, 182,000? By putting junior men in there, and the seniors go with seniority, 4 weeks vacation and stuff like that. The new men don't get any vacation right away.
So when was the analysis done? And how long, and that's the analysis over the 9 different positions, right? I'm saying, what's the analysis that's done when the decisions are made individually?
I think that question, those questions were answered earlier.
No, they weren't.
I thought you asked me a question, if we did an economic analysis, and the answer to my question, to your question at that time, was what we knew was, with respect to, they would have an impact because of one person would get 10%.
That's all you said, I never heard a number.
That's right, and I said there was no
There was no
we had
calculation.
idea, there was no further analysis. The analysis, that's what I'm saying, this is an apples and oranges thing. The analysis that the chief is referring to is analysis that was done after the fact.
Right.
Right.
That's all I'm saying. Thank you. I didn't know whether there was analysis. Mr. Saxel just said there was an analysis done that showed, because we were keeping tight control over the budget. We were trying to calculate what the impact was going to be
Mr.
at
Flynn,
the time.
on my part, there was, because I
That's what
figured
I
out
was
the numbers.
asking. Yeah.
On my part, there was analysis taken
Okay.
that we saved $182,000.
No, that's over 9 positions, right? That's over a several-year period. I'm talking on the individual decisions as they're being made. Is there an analysis done that shows what the economic impact on the individual decisions?
Is that the one where they started at 900, 800,000?
No,
and
that's
I'm
old.
confused. Yeah, somebody come up with numbers, I think, you know. some
No,
of the
Mr.
way.
Saxel just represented that your budgets have been tight, you've been concerned about it, you've been doing economic analysis to make fiscally prudent decisions on the individual cases, and I just wanted to know, I haven't seen that. When this came up last December, January, I didn't see that analysis. We haven't seen that
No, but
analysis.
my budget was the lowest in the town of Fairfield. It was not, I think it was
So- I'm
lower than
sorry.
1%. So, you know, they have to look at it. I personally think that's good management on my part. Maybe you don't think so, but I do. That was the
I didn't
lowest
say that.
budget in the town.
I didn't say that. No.
Nobody looked at that, though, you know. But anyway, you know, we always look at the worst things rather than the good things. But anyway, Mr. Saxel.
Generally speaking, that's, you know, we've been on this long enough. If you have additional questions of the chief, he'll be happy to answer them for you.
Questions, anybody? Yeah,
Well,
Mr.
Mr.
Walsh.
Saxel, you said something when you first came up to the table that you referred saying that we misunderstood something regarding the email that was attached by Mr. Curry. Are you trying to say that he did not take the job one day and issue his papers to retire the next day? Because, I mean,
All I know is I'm reading his Exhibit B that says
He waited
I
12
was assigned
days.
on the 11th and I retired on the 23rd.
retired means that was his last day of service, means that's the day he started retirement.
I do not
I'm looking
know
at
the-
Exhibit B. Have you had a chance to see Mr. Turnbecky's report?
Yes.
Have you seen Exhibit B?
I don't know if it was legible in what I had.
Do you want me to hand it to you? Take a look at? I just want to get the factual information out there.
I believe, Mr. Walsh, I believe that was corrected. They were wrong numbers at one time. So, remember, they came back with different
Well,
numbers.
when I look at it, it seems to suggest in Mr. at least Turnbecky's report, I'm just talking about Mr. Curry. It seems to suggest that there's a column in there called retirement date. And there's also in the next column, date retirement announced.
I think Mr. Curry, and again, I'm shooting from the hip there, Jim, didn't retire on that date. He made it known that he was retiring that date.
Okay.
Did in the beginning Curry want to go in the training center, which he is a certified training officer?
Sure.
No, he did not.
Okay.
When Tracy changed his mind and put in his grievance, Curry goes, well, you know, if he loses it, I'm going back, I might as well get out. And Steve would make that, I guess, it was a misunderstanding between Mr. Trembecky and Steve Curry. talked to him numerous times. He was in the office and also with the commission.
Hold on one second. Miss Mary Carol Marilis, could you come to the microphone? I just want to, this is your form, right? Because Mr. Saxel can't read it.
The way we consider the date.
Are you familiar with this form, first of all?
Yes.
Did you prepare it?
Eileen Kennelly worked on this
Okay.
one. The date retirement announced is the date that they come and sign the papers in front of us. When you retire, any defined benefit pension has the spouse come and acknowledge in front of us that that they're agreeing to the selection. In fire and police, it doesn't really make any difference, but we treat them the same. So the date that we have there asterisk is the date that they fill in all the paperwork.
And that was
Completed. They may have picked it up before. They may have had it for months. They may have come in and discussed it with us for months. That's the date their application is dated and signed in front of us.
Okay, but on your, this spreadsheet where it says date of change, 10/11/12 was the date that Mr. Curry moved up in his position, correct? 10/11/12?
10/11/12, yes, and the date he came in and signed the papers were 10/12/12.
Okay, thank you. I'm done.
Mr. Brockman. Thanks, Mr. Flynn. I just actually say one thing about what Jim is talking about, then I'll ask my question. I mean, I think it's interesting that some lawyers are parsing 1 day versus 12, but I think it's safe to say that 1 or 12 is just as bad. Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't, I mean, it's interesting for a factual discussion, but it's awful from that point of view, whether it's 1, 12, 20, or 4, at least in my view. I've been trying to go through this timeline a little bit, and maybe the chief could help me out a little bit, because
Be glad to.
you have so much experience, and you've been with the town for so long, and we all know that, so obviously you have your reasons for making the decisions you make in running your department. So Mr. Tracy, and I don't know any of these gentlemen, okay? Mr. Tracy is in the training center.
Right.
You decide that he needs time out on the field.
On the line.
I'm sorry. And he apparently doesn't want to do this necessarily, which is fine, because that's your job. You have to tell people, things that they have to do. And so you move him, let's just say it's against his will for the purpose of the discussion, and you bring in Mr. Chavanello, and there seems to be some question as to why he was brought in versus Curry based on the seniority thing, but I'll leave that aside for a second. And here's where it starts getting concerning to me. So, and according to what Dick just says, he wasn't necessarily looking to retire in however many days he did. I forget already what it was, but he actually was planning to do it for 6 months or 9 months, whatever, and then he has some personal situation that causes him to retire.
Exactly.
Okay, fine.
Yep.
Fine, okay. Then, according to this report, and doesn't seem to be any dispute about it, Mr. Curry is widely known within the department, and you're the chief, and I suppose you're plugged in, to be retiring imminently. I mean, unless you dispute that fact, which seems to be established by everybody I've talked to and in this report.
Mr. Curry at that time had no intentions of retiring. Mr. Curry had stated that with this new contract coming up, that if it goes sour, that, yeah, he was going to get out before he lost.
Let me not interrupt you, but
No, go ahead,
Mr.
please.
Tembecky just sat up here, and I think it's even written in his report, that he said it was widely accepted. In fact, I think Mr. Curry, am I misunderstanding, said to you that he had made it clear to everybody that he was going to retire. Right, so this is a big point of dispute, and I think this is the crux of the issue here.
Right.
The question is, why would you put somebody in who, at least our report tells us, is widely known within the community to be retiring any moment?
Okay. According to Mr. Curry, and he said, matter of fact, he would come tonight if I wanted him to, that, yeah, he was going to retire, and he thinks Mr. Trambicki misunderstood him, and no offense, but if anyone asked me, am I going to retire, I'll say, yeah. And he says, oh, yeah. He says, I'm thinking of retiring, I'm going to retire. but he didn't know he was going to be put in there and retired.
I think it's important that we don't parse, I hear you, but I mean, we do have, this is a big point of
Mr. Curry
dispute.
didn't want to go in the training center at that time.
I understand,
And I
but
talked to
but
Steve
I'm
Newman
focusing
at
on
that.
the issue of his, except for you, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
your attorney, everybody else seems to say that this fellow was widely known to be retiring imminently. I don't know what word you used in your report, but it's something like imminent. And so I have an additional question.
Yep.
So the question is, why would, because, look, you're no longer the union rep, you work for the town, you're the chief of
Right.
fire.
Right.
So why would you put a guy in there, and I'm asking this as a question, not as an accusation, who's assumed to be retiring any day, and of course you know the contract, so you know what's going to happen with his pension. And then the next question I have, and this is Curry, I'm not Curry, I'm losing track of, no, I'm sorry.
Chavanello?
No, Tracy.
Tracy.
Mr. Tracy, who you thought was so critical that he needs line experience, that this started this entire chain of events, all of a sudden is put right back into his training position.
Yes, right.
So he never got the experience and the training
True.
that he needed.
True.
So the whole thing just doesn't
That's when I
sound
started
right.
taking hits by some letter that was sent. And
I
you know what?
understand. So, I mean, I
It's
just wanna-
costing me money, too, so
I
I
just want you
figured
to
let it
understand
go.
why we have questions. I think it's very difficult for us sitting here, and I'm trying to be very
I
careful how
understand.
I'm questioning you, because I don't mean to in any way say that I understand this
Mm-hmm.
that well. But I think I'm smart enough at least to listen and read what is being said. And I think it's also important for you, as a truly legendary character in our town's recent history, to understand why people are so upset about this. Why the average person who hears this asks, what's going on? You know, who's managing our money? And, you know, we have a report here, just to say one more thing, from the Hooker and Holcomb, that says that all these activities cost us $883, am I reading this right, Mr. Mayor? $883,000, which I would say, by the way, grossly underestimates the true cost, because it uses a 7.5% discount rate that I think, so the truth is, I think it's several $1 million. But leaving that part aside, $883,000, that's a lot of money, right? In a year when we almost killed each other over a
But
budget.
that's not true, the 800,000. They did an audit.
Am I misstating my?
You need to read the rest of the letter.
Oh, see, I didn't. Okay, there's a net cost, I see, 197. Well, it's still a lot of money. And
Yeah, $100,000.
So the point,
There's a big difference in 100,000 and 800,000.
there is, and I apologize.
200,
right? Thanks for saving me on so early on that one. But at the end of the day, there's increased pensions being paid to some people who worked for little or no time in the jobs they held. I think that's a safe discussion. And it just, you know, I walked you through. I guess, again, the biggest thing I don't understand is how a fellow who was widely known to be retiring will be put into a job, you know, that would result in him having a higher pension, and then he retires the next day or 12 days. Anyway,
Number one, it's contract, and no, he didn't know he was retiring the next day. Did I want Tracy to get experience on the line? Yes, he's never been on the line. He'll say, yeah, he has experience on the line. No, he doesn't. I have an email that he changed his mind. He said he talked to his wife and family, and he changed his mind, he wanted to go down there. Okay? Back to the training center.
Back to-
Yeah, that's when all of this started to blow up. Well, they work a 4-day work week. They have a vehicle, and they get 10% more. So he talked to his wife, and he changed his mind a couple days later. Okay, you changed your mind. Did I pay any attention to it? No. Because as chief of the department, I wanted him to get line experience. And my hands are tied there. I think people should go in different divisions within the department so they can learn it. I've been in every division in the Fairfield Fire Department. All right? I feel that helped me in my promotion. All right? And that's what I did. I did this for the best of the department. And also, I made it very, very, very clear to the Board of Fire Commissioners, they wanted an executive session, not me, okay? What I was doing, and Mr. Popolowski now changed his mind because I have talked to him. They were all aware of it. Chairman Christie was going to come tonight and say that I made them aware of it. At a selectmen's meeting, Ms. Barrett got up, who was secretary at that time, and stated the chief made us aware of all of this. So I don't know what more you want. I don't just do things on my own. I cover my back a little bit, and I always have. And, you know, am I taking hits on this? Well, yeah, I feel I am. And I think it's unnecessary because if someone sent a letter. I'll go back, and maybe you don't want to hear this, it might sound a little silly. I dealt with John Sullivan, I was president of the union there. When he got an anonymous letter, he used to rip it up and throw it in the trash can. I can write an anonymous letter tomorrow if I don't like you. And does that mean you're going to follow it up? But no one came to me at any time and asked me about any letters or what was going on. Was I disappointed in that? Yeah. I feel Mr. Flynn should have come right to my office, as he done in the past, on budget reasons. Never contacted me, but the next thing I knew, it was sent out on email to all the Board of Finance and all the RTM. But no one till this day has ever come to me and asked me to please explain this, what went on. So therefore, now they hire all this investigation, which is costing the town big bucks, okay? And here where we are now. I don't know what you want me to say. I followed the contract, I always have, and I'm well aware, I know the contract very well, and I do my best.
Just a few, and I'll give up the floor. Two comments, actually, or two statements. First of all, thank you. And by the way, you have come every time we've asked. You've answered all the questions.
Thank you.
And
Thank
we
you, sir.
appreciate that.
I appreciate it.
And at the very least, this entire episode has illuminated a problem which even your attorney and our former town's attorney agrees, you know, is an issue, and hopefully the current first selectman and so forth are going to work on
Well, I
this.
had it
And
going
hopefully
down
your
the
union
tubes.
will also understand that this is a sore spot, and maybe we can move past it with new language. What I'd like to say is one other thing, because he's a good friend of mine, and he's probably too modest to defend himself here. But Mr. Flynn, I think, because I know he spoke to me, not exactly when he got the letter, he probably didn't think it was appropriate to talk to me at that time, but at some point afterward, actually was torn with how to handle this letter. I know this. And felt that this was of such a high level of potential scandal that he had to do what he thought was best. And I just wanted to say that because Tom has tremendous integrity. And
I have the highest respect for Tom, and Tom has always come to me on everything and asked me questions, and I sat with him many, many times. And I do respect that. I'm not here
No, I just think
trying
that
to pat him on the back.
Not to beat it, but I think that he felt this was way outside of the normal type of thing that he has to deal with.
Matter of fact, I think I know who wrote the letter, but I'm not going to go there.
Anyway,
I can't
don't-
prove.
Tom
All right?
can defend himself,
You know,
but I just wanted to say.
Not
to say
everybody
that on
loves
his
me, you
behalf.
know?
Mr. Walsh.
I have 2 points. And Dick, I'll allow you to address it. I just want to ask Alex one question, because I heard what you said, Mr. Brockfeld. In reading your report, Alex, my reading of the CBA and your analysis seems to suggest that in regards to Mr. Curry, the chief had no choice. Once Mr. Curry approached the chief, regardless of his intentions of staying, whether his intention in his head was to stay 1 day or 10 years, the second he came to the chief and said, hey, I have a problem. I was passed over a week ago or whatever it was, but I'm the next highest seniority person on that list. And pursuant to the CBA, it's my job. I don't think the chief had a decision, right? Because otherwise there would have been a grievance, he could have aggrieved that.
Well, you're right. I think there would have probably been a grievance by Curry had he, the other option, of course, would have been for the chief to put Tracy back in the job.
Yeah. But if you know, I have to take the chief at his word about the training and moving Tracy up and whatever. But I don't really have a problem with anything the chief did regarding Mr. Curry, because once he came to him and said, I'm on the seniority list. And since we don't have an exam or we don't have all the other stuff, and, you know, whatever.
My only thing is
The position.
that Curry was the first man on the seniority list and should have gotten the job before Chevanello.
I understand. That's a different question. But I'm talking about once he came to him.
Yeah,
And
I think the chief would have, would have probably been grieved by Curry had he not put him in the job because the job was open. But the simple answer would have been to put Tracy back in the job. And, you know, the question, of course, is why Tracy, if he needed a line experience, why he hasn't been put back on the line since. So.
Great.
Did you have anything else?
The only other thing is not to be not to ingratiate the chairman enough, but I will hold the. I think our chairman does a great job. I think he did the right decision in the course that he went down in bringing this before us. And I know there's been anonymous letters he has gotten before, And I've gotten anonymous letters before, and we're in a tricky spot, because if we bury the letter or bury the information, we'll look like we're trying to be part of a cover-up. That's the problem. So the chairman's spoken to me about this before in other matters. He's always followed the same course of action, and he followed it in this course, and you know, I commend him for doing it. And, you know, sometimes I think that does ruffle some feathers or whatever, but I think you got to be consistent with what you do, and you always have done that, and you know, I think you did.
I usually get about 5 letters a year of complaints on different officers at different calls.
Yep.
And I call the officer in to ask him
Yeah.
what the circumstances are, and I look into it further
Yeah.
of the people that were there.
Yeah.
And so far, they all went away, because
Yeah.
you'll find that
The
someone
problem
just
I've
has
had
a chip
with-
on their shoulder.
The problem we've had in this seat sometimes, where we've had it, is town employees with grievances, whether they're right or whether they're wrong. And sometimes you can tell just by reading them that someone's just not being completely accurate, and they have some axe to burn. Bring something to you anonymously,
Right.
and we're not in the investigative role. So it's our job to turn it over to the first selectman and say, we've been presented with this evidence or this allegation, and either bring it forth here or to give it to the first selectman's office and to turn it over and whatever. You know, it's unfortunate that people won't put their name on it.
I know.
It's unfortunate that people won't stand by their information. I don't find it the best route to go down. I agree with you, Chief. I think it's a bit cowardly that somebody won't present it, but you know, that's the position we're in, and as a body, when we get it, I don't know what else to do but to turn it over or to put it up for an investigation of some sort.
I understand, as
Yeah,
I said,
that's-
and
that's the
I
only
have the highest respect for Mr. Flynn, and I really mean that, and I think he knows that. But, you know, still in all, if there was something done wrong, Curry could have grieved it right then and there. When I put Chavanello, Curry could have grieved that right there and said, wait, I got a grievance. So that's obvious that Curry wasn't really that interested, because he never grieved it. He grieved it when Tracy changed his mind. You know, I don't know what else to tell you. And there were 5 people there, which Mr. Saxel talked to him. You know, I had one person come to me that's in a higher echelon in the town and say, well, I talked to the firefighters. Well, that individual, and it's a higher echelon, never went to one of the individuals that were involved in this. So I go, well, who did you talk to? Well, that's not important. But I checked with every person that was in that room and all of the ones involved, and that individual never talked to one of them. Do I know the person she talked to now, after a month? Yes, I do. And do I understand the individual why? Yes, I do. So I don't mean to be, you know, a wise guy there.
Mr. Bolito, and then we'll go to Mrs. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've been spending a lot of time talking about this, and it's gotten unnecessarily nasty and personal at times. The fact remains this. Nobody, everyone who's spoken here tonight, nobody would argue the fact that nothing illegal was done here. The contract says what it says. As much of a raw deal as that is for taxpayers, the contract says what it says. And Attorney Saxel stated correctly that this provision was attempted to be negotiated out of the contract. It was not. There are myriad reasons for that. If we want this to not happen in the future, the answer is very simple. Get this out of the contract. You know, there's a saying, don't hate the player, hate the game. Well, there's a lot of the game to hate here, the game being the contract. And it's really, that's what it boils down to. All the rest of it, all the back and forth and the talking about the persons and people involved really is irrelevant, because they exercised their rights under the collective bargaining agreement. The chief did what he was contractually allowed to do. That's it. I mean, you want to get rid of this problem, change the contract. It really is that simple. And First Selectman Tetro has stated very clearly that that is a goal of the reconstituted negotiating team going forward. So, to me, the issue has been discussed, and it comes down to the contract. And until that is changed, we can talk all night about it, but it's not going to change the fact that nothing illegal was done here. It's not right what ended up happening. It's a raw deal for taxpayers, certainly, but it ain't illegal.
Thank you.
follow on that. It's not rebutting it in any way. But again, you have a very knowledgeable union. As I said, I dealt with 7 of them. These folks really know it. And when they see the handwriting on the wall, because it did happen in the last negotiation session, they heard what they heard at the RTM, and that's priming the pump. That's why you get a big number of people retiring. It's the cost of doing business. I've never said at any point it wasn't the right thing to do. But this is a temporary thing, and I think it goes by quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Alvin.
Thank you, Mr. Bolito, because you summarized my comments quite well. Mr. Bolito and I both worked on one contract together when he represented the Board of Finance at the Board of Ed. And it's been said here tonight, when you're negotiating a contract, there's a lot of give and take. And you sometimes get what you want, and you sometimes have to give to get something. And not being part of this particular contract, I wouldn't know everything that they had on the table. I've negotiated as part of a team contracts for the Board of Education when we had a particular item that was so important to us that we had to give things that we didn't want to give. But we also had an eye to be sure that what we were giving was certainly not going to be harmful to the taxpayers, to the system. And it is the contract in this case. Unfortunately, when people get anonymous letters and you are struggling with what to do with them, and in this case, the contents of that letter implied by reading that, if someone would say, an average person in town would say, what is going on in my town? What is wrong? The right thing has been done to look into this matter. I think this matter has been investigated. I think it has been sliced. It has been diced. I am comfortable that the chief acted as he had the authority to act. I am sorry if he feels defensive in this matter, because I think anyone reading any of these materials and these findings would understand that the chief did what he had the authority to do. And so, Mr. Fellner, Chief Fellner, I hope that you will understand that I recognize that. I hope
Thank
the
you.
public will recognize that. And on behalf of anyone who has made you feel uncomfortable, I'd like to say I'm sorry, because
Well,
you have
thank you very
served
much.
this
That
town
was
well.
nice of you.
And, but unfortunately, sometimes in these matters, people get very sensitive and tension gets high. We've said here tonight, it's the contract. I said it earlier, Mr. Bolito has said it well. This next contract needs to be looked at very carefully by those who negotiate it. And if we have a representative from this board, they should be reporting back to this board to keep us well informed.
That's the conundrum they can't.
It is the conundrum, because this board has a representative at the Board of Education, but doesn't have a representative on the town side.
Oh, no, but they can't, the conundrum is actually they can be part of the negotiations if asked, but
Right,
they
and
can't
they-
report back.
Correct.
Yeah.
But we have to hope that they will recognize if we give them messages. And another point about this contract went through the hands of a lot of people. And a lot of people should have read this contract, because this contract went to the RTM. And there's people that should have been reading this contract and saying, what about this? And because it never happened before, because, as I said, the stars aligned, the perfect storm, whatever you want to call it, it happened, and now it just has to be fixed so it doesn't happen again. And I'm sorry to burst everyone's bubble, but if it's not this issue, somewhere down the road, we're going to find a problem in another contract. We just don't get it perfect all the time.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Alvin. You know, I just wanted to say this, and, you know, it may sound silly. This is the first blemish I had on my record in 50 years, from when I was in college, in the Marine Corps, and here. And did I take it personal? Yeah. I mean, I'm on the front page of the Connecticut Post like I was a criminal, and it bothered my pride and my name, my family. My daughter was the most upset, to look like I'm a real bad guy. One guy at the coffee shop said I should have been shot. at the French bakery. I mean, this is what I was going through. So I did take it personal, and, you know, I didn't know where to turn, and this is what it is. But in all my time here, it's the first blemish that I've had on my record or controversy in this last year. So I said it, and I feel good saying it. Thank you.
Sure. Couple points, if I might. Does anybody else have anything? I can appreciate the chief's position as regards my not contacting him, and as I said in our first conversation here, that wasn't going to happen. I have, as Mr. Walsh has alluded to, received other letters, and those other letters, since we don't have an administrative function for the town or an operational function for the town, have been passed on to the administration for their follow-up. And Mr. Tetra, I can say, when it's happened under his watch, has followed up on it. And actually, when Mr. Saxel was town attorney under Mr. Flato, he followed up on one of the letters that I had received, as well as other town officials had received. This letter was different because, A, it proposed that there was a fraud being perpetrated on pensioners and on taxpayers, and B, it actually implicated, if you recall the letter, not just the fire chief, but the first selectman. So there was no one to actually go to with this letter, okay? So I did the next best thing. I made sure that every member of my board had this letter so that they knew exactly what I was wrestling with on our behalf. And then I informed the first selectman that I was going to have a public hearing on this letter at one of our meetings so that it would have the opportunity to be responded to in public. The only thing that you said tonight, Chief, that I disagreed with as relates my conduct or my conduct towards you in this, is where you said that you never had the opportunity or were never questioned about this letter. You actually were up here for about an hour at that meeting in January and had every opportunity to discuss everything you want. And you said a lot of what you said tonight when you were here in January. So I did afford you, and this board did afford you, the opportunity to address the letter directly. It was the Board of Selectmen and the first selectman who decided to hire Mr. Trembecki, and we agreed with that, and we provided questions for them to answer as part of that letter, and I think they did that well. And Mr. Trembecki, again, I thank you for your service on this issue. But I didn't want you for a second to think that you didn't get a fair shake as regards this. No member of this board that I'm aware of ever sent that letter to the press. No member of this board distributed it to all the RTM members. I discussed it with Mr. Tetra. It was sent to our board, and it was sent to the moderator of the RTM. What he did with it after I gave it to him, that's under the jurisdiction of his board. I also spoke with the head of Human Resources about the letter. So those were the actions, and quite frankly, I appreciate the comments of my colleagues on the board. If I had to do it all over again, I'd do the same thing, because I'm a representative of the people, and when something like that is mentioned, and when it was so detailed, so specific, and quite frankly, when I started looking into the fact pattern through the help of Mrs. Merrilees, who did not know the reason I was asking the questions, the fact pattern actually bore out some of the fact pattern that was represented by the letter. So it wasn't done before there was a little due diligence on our part, or on my part, to say, sadly, there might be something there.
Okay. No, I understand you're doing your job, and I think you know how I feel, too, you know? I mean, we always talk, and I understand you're doing your job. I mean, it's business is business, and friendship is another thing, you know? So, but don't you take it personal what I said, and do I sometimes? Yeah. So if I said that out of the way, I apologize. And thank you for your comment from Ms. Albin and stuff.
Any other questions, comments on this matter? Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, can we get some type of report from Mr. Mayor on the total cost of this entire process?
I don't understand your question. The cost of what process?
The investigation, the independent counsel's costs, pending these meetings, everything.
Thank you. Yes. Mr. Mayor, can we get that at a future meeting? Any other questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll... Oh, Mrs.
I was just
LaFleur.
going to ask if administration could provide us like some kind of written summary of what they're doing to,
Excellent point, yes. Mr. Tetro, can you provide us with a summary of what action steps are taken as a result of the report and the discussion? Okay? And
Thank
we're
you.
going to take a 5-minute break. Thank you.
I'm sure I'll be seeing you again.
Sure. All right. Next item on the agenda is to review the current status of the town's pension and OPEB funds. We have our standard reports that we get at every quarter. Who's going to represent the pension board?
This will be me? Yeah, nothing in it. It did well.
All right, this should be fairly straightforward this time. Again, Mr. Brockville? These are the pension reports. Do you want to,
No, I mean, I looked over them if I'm being somehow deputized, and the markets have been spectacular, and we've done well.
right. A couple questions I had on them, if we could.
I'll ask them after you.
Okay. As I go through our voluminous information here. So, Mr. Mayor, turning to OPEB, is that actively being managed by the Pension Investment Board now?
Let me just do very briefly a report,
Okay.
because this last quarter was a very, very active quarter.
Yep.
We restructured the equity portfolio. When I say we, I'm talking about the board. Terminated the active large cap managers and replaced them with a passively managed S&P fund.
Yeah.
Reflecting belief that the the records of active management's benchmark over large cap index doesn't validate the fees.
Paying for the fees, right?
So we hired BlackRock in a competitive process to manage the U.S. equity portfolio transition. We terminated Columbus Circle, we terminated Iridian, and we hired BlackRock to manage the S&P 500 index in another competitive basis. We also changed Jennison's mandate from small and mid-cap stocks to just small caps to reduce the overweight to mid-cap. And we left Boston Company, the mid-manager, alone. We changed the share class in the Euro-Pacific Fund. There's different share classes in the fund, and there's been different share classes introduced subsequent to the town's entry into the fund, and the different share classes have different fee structures, and so we moved into a lower fee structure of share class that will save the pension plan about $100,000 a year. We had, as I think you know, the town was behind. If you look at the document, looking at the asset distribution, we only have 1.18% private equity versus 5% target, and that was for two reasons. Reason number one, it took a while for the town to complete subscription agreements, which were completed last September, I think, finally, August, September timeline. No, it was before that. It was actually in, when I took that. Anyway, it was last spring. But, you can't just put, when you vote a position in a private equity, you can't just lump the $10 million in or the $15 million, whatever you voted to. You have to wait for the capital calls. And so we did have our first capital call from Mesero for $600,000 in June. And then also to fall back into line with our investment policy guidelines, we sold, I think, about $9.5 million of domestic equity to redistribute into commodities and fixed income, domestic fixed. You know, and when you do that, it's kind of interesting because you're saying, you know, but wait, interest rates are going to go up. You know, is this the right time to do that? But the interest of the board and the intent of the board is there is a policy that has asset allocations, and the board felt it was appropriate to live with their policies. So that restructuring was done. With respect to OPEB, the OPEB was kind of like a three-step allocation process. Step one was just put all assets in the fixed income because there just wasn't a lot to spread around. And so we're now into step two, which is more return-oriented, where we sold 100% of the assets of the fund in June and redistributed them, doing when currently we have 38% in U.S. equity, 24% in international equity, 28% in fixed income. The targets are 42%, 28, and 30, so we're pretty close to our targets. So we're now, again, a lot of this, because of the size, so it's a $12 million fund compared to the $300+ million fund in the pension, they're all in index. However, we leveraged, even though we did a competitive bid and we did some negotiating, so we were able to leverage our fee base, even though it's a $12 million fund, we leveraged our fee base to tie the investments in with people who were also involved with our pension plan. So we got the lower fee base based upon a much higher pension. So I think, A, that answers your question, and B, gives you an idea of what's been going on in the last quarter. It's a very active quarter.
If I go to the returns, we're not doing too well in the last 12 months on the OPEB funds, though, correct? I'm trying to figure out what's the...
Because they just switched from all.
It's just because you just, right, that's exactly what I was thinking. So you just moved from fixed income into the other, so we lost a bunch of money in fixed income.
Correct.
Didn't get the stocks.
And didn't get the pickup in the stocks. And now,
So
like
July
I'm saying-
July should have been better. July was a good month for equities.
So now OPEB, because in the past, OPEB was just kind of accumulating the assets, and they were sitting there, and they weren't being, as I would call, actively managed, and now
They
they've
were in
been
a
applied.
Sykes domestic fixed income fund.
Right.
Yes, sir.
So now this is a topic discussion at the pension board, at the
Yeah,
investment meetings.
right. It just seemed like it was, we reached that $12 million mark, and we figured it was time to, so this took a couple of months. It wasn't like a decision that was made in a month. We had to talk about it, think about it, pick the vehicles, and then execute the transactions. So it's a 2 or 3 month process.
Any other questions, Mr. Brockville? No,
Thanks.
go to Mr. Bolito.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the report. There was a lot of movement there, so I appreciate that, a lot of information. I'm going to beat a bit of a dead horse here, and some nights Brian is here to take it, so now you get to get it, Mr. Mayor. But it's something I think is very important, and I just want to restate it. We have 15% of our total assets in each of 2 fixed income funds, managed fixed income funds, if I'm correct. Correct.
Montgomery and Sykes.
Right. And, traditionally, if you asked a market veteran of 20 or 30 years, or even a person on the street, they would think that equities are significantly more volatile than bonds, right? Bonds have been traditionally thought of as some sort of ballast or, safe haven, when in fact they're not necessarily. I'm not telling you something you don't know. They can be very volatile, and in fact, in the last 3 to 5 weeks, ever since the Federal Reserve implicated that they might back off on some of their policies, fixed income has taken a fairly substantial hit, depending on which areas of fixed income you look at. I'm not focusing now on performance, by the way. I'm just trying to point out that fixed income can move quite a bit. And so I've asked this before, so I'm asking again, is that I know that there may or may not be any written maximums. I thought when I was on the pension fund that we tried to keep no more than 10% of the overall fund in any one investment. Again, I'm not sure if that was written down or not, so I don't want to say otherwise.
It was discussed at this table as well.
I know
That's
that
right, and I'm bringing it up again.
We have written maximums on the equities. I do not know if we have written
Right.
maximums on
So
the rest.
my question / suggestion, and I think we have a very good working relationship between our board and your pension board, and you wear many hats, is that you guys discuss internally, maybe educate yourselves to the potential volatility of fixed income funds. I'm not arguing for or against fixed income, but the potential volatility, and maybe the same discipline of no more than 10% in investment in equities or private equity, et cetera, should also apply to fixed income, because it would not take the sun and the moon to align in a weird way for there to be a big move in fixed income. And if one of these funds happened to be invested in some type of fixed income that was subject to volatility, I think it would be hard to explain why 15% of a total fund that's so large, $315 million, is in one single fund. So I apologize for repeating myself. I'm probably going to keep doing it until maybe we get either an explanation as to why we don't do it, or you tell me to shut up. But I just think that it's just important that people understand that fixed income can move just as volatilely as equity. That's all.
I will
Thanks.
bring it to the August meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brockfield. I'm going to go to Mr. Bolito, who was patient, and Mr. Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to the pension review, I noticed that in the last 60 months that hedge funds are showing a return overall of 38.72%, which is far and away the largest rate of return for any of the types of investments that we have. Does the fact that it is so much greater than the other investments we have cause you any concern or raise a red flag, given the problems we've had in the past?
There's one thing to take note of, which is included in that, is the recoveries from Madoff.
Okay. So that skews the number, in
That
essence.
skews the numbers. 'Cause that's like
Understood.
$10 million or something.
Okay. So that explains it then. All right, thank you.
Mr. Walsh?
Good question. I didn't look at that.
This follows up on Mr. Brockfeld's question. And you said that, and Bob, you kind of just mentioned offhand that there's requirements under domestic equity on the percentages of investment.
You
And
talk about BlackRock.
Yeah,
We
it's
figured since
17%.
it's an index fund.
Well, what's the policy on, you said that there was a policy on domestic equities. What is the
I
policy?
think it's 10%, and basically, what I think that the reason basically, the overall policy is that domestic equity will cap at 30, and it had gotten over 30, and that's one of the reasons we did the rebalancing. We moved the money into the index fund because, again, the feeling that in the large cap, there's not a great benefit, that the benefit of active management in large cap does not equal the cost of active management in large cap. And since it's an index fund, since it's a passive management, that 10% policy was not considered as being something that made sense to follow, because it's the index fund. So
But all those things seem to make-
If you
yeah.
got two index funds,
Yep.
three index funds, it's still the same index fund, more or less.
But it raises the point, if you have a policy, the policy doesn't have that exception built into it, then they should change the policy, if that makes sense. Because some of the stuff you say makes perfectly good sense. But if we're in breach of a policy,
Yeah, one of the
I think we
things
got to address it.
Yeah, and then one of the things we are doing is reviewing the policy. That is true. But we haven't, because part of the policy consideration is that, what our asset mix should be, because the policy has not been reviewed for about 2 years, so they are actively looking at what changes should you make to the policy. But in the meantime, it didn't make sense from a cost perspective, to pay the extra fees to split that, since it'd be the same investment.
Would we be, Mr.
don't-
Chairman,
because you don't
would we
have,
be able to get
like-
an update on that at the next quarterly review meeting? So it gives you 3 months or a little less than 3 months to talk to them and figure out what you're going to do and make a presentation on it at the next quarterly review meeting?
Yeah, or, yes.
Okay.
Basically, I think what you're hearing is we're all cognizant of concentration risk, and we want to make sure that,
Yeah.
and I know you guys are as well, but given the events of
Yeah.
previous years,
Right.
that's been a hot button for
Right.
all of us.
And again, the concentration risk is not as major concern when you're in an index fund, because.
Exactly. I understand, but we want to know that there's a
Yeah.
policy there, and it's.
Right, you got it.
And do the same policies apply to the OPEB fund as well?
I believe they do. I cannot speak to that specifically for sure, though.
Only because the Vanguard fund there, and I know it's an index fund,
Right.
is double what the policy says.
Right. Yeah.
And I think what they'll come back with is, and Mr. Walsh, I agree with you, but I think what they'll come back with, because I think the response to that in the previous period has been that those are, they're guidelines, not necessarily, maximums. and that they do take those into consideration. But that said, I happen to agree. There's a large concentration there.
Yeah, and again, the
It's an index
rationale
fund.
that is an index fund, so.
Yep. Any other questions, comments, concerns on pension matters this evening? Seeing none, thank you. Thanks for the report. Go on to the next issue, which is review the Board of Education financial position versus budget. I see we don't have members of the Board of Education, or rather the administration here this evening to address any questions. If there's any questions we do have, please email them to myself and Mrs. Bossy if they can't be addressed by the town administration and this evening, and we'll follow up and get back to everyone with answers to this. Remember, we'll be able to go over this again because these are the year-end results, so they are presently under audit and subject to change as they go through that audit. So, does anybody have any questions or comments on the Board of Education? I know I do.
I do as well.
Okay, so my big question here that I think we need to follow up on relates to a transfer done from the personnel services line, where it looks as though there was close to $1.1 million that was transferred out of there and used to cover additional expenses. And I want to make sure that we're reading the schedule right. One of those additional expenses is related to security.
Tom, do you mind telling us where you're looking?
Yeah. Yes, I do mind telling you. No. Okay, so look at the first page.
I see it on the first page, right.
Right, and there's $1,094,000, okay? Then there was another page where, and I'm looking for it, I saw it earlier today, right, where it was security updates, 573,000, right? And then legal services of 290. So it seems as though, on the face of it, that you had $1.1 million savings in this recurring expense, which is personnel costs. And you used it to cover security, additional security expenses and legal expenses. Now, I don't know the nature of the legal expenses, right? And I also don't know whether those security costs are one-time in nature related to the incident in Sandy Hook and how we use that. But what that would imply to me is that you overfunded this by close to $1 million. And is that a carry forward next year? So, A, how did the $1 million get saved in personnel costs? Mr. Walsh has always asked the whole replacement thing.
Right.
You know, more tenured teachers retiring, more inexperienced and, dare I say, cheaper teachers coming in, right? Is that what's driving this? Or what's driving this? And then on the security side, were those one-time in nature, or are those ongoing recurring costs? Mr. DeWitt?
So, I'm with you. So this page, the Excel.
Microphone.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry. The Excel spreadsheet looking thing.
And by the way,
That-
I don't have the narrative, so I don't.
Yeah, no, but that ties out to 1.399, which I think ties to that front page you're saying 1.09. No, it doesn't. I was going to say, and the 355 in maintenance.
Well, it zeroes itself out. If you take the special appropriations and the transfers, that column on the front page zeroes itself out, as you would
Right.
expect,
Right, sure.
right? And my guess is, though I didn't tick and tie it, is that the other page actually zeroes itself out too.
It does, but it zeroes it out to almost 1.4 million, which is,
Yeah.
you see where it says at the bottom, transfers approved? And
Yeah.
then much to your
Yeah, I do.
point, security updates and legal services.
It's not quite as much, right?
Yeah, and then there's a whole line that appears under maintenance of 86,000,
Yep.
that it's just gone. Like, they didn't spend any money on maintenance, and because of the other withdrawal, I don't know if it's an encumbrance or a transfer, those negative numbers, but the 86,478, which was a projected balance, is just gone. They just took it and transferred it, so.
So
It
I think-
appear-
I
it
think
appears
we-
like they did no maintenance.
Yeah.
Which seems wrong, right?
So I think we need to be stepped through these, at least I would like to be stepped through these items. Does anyone disagree? Or-
Yeah, no, I'd like to see. 'em.
Without a narrative and a presentation from them,
Yep.
we're really looking at numbers on a page. And it
That
probably.
was well said.
Probably would not be safe to draw conclusions and
Yep.
make assumptions until they present this to us.
Yep. So those are my questions in looking at it. Anybody else have anything major they want to add to that? And we'll go back to that.
I agree with Ms. Albin. I think this deserves a full presentation on our, maybe
Yep.
one of our next Board of Finance meetings. It's the quarterly review. Somebody could be sent from the administration to handle it, and I think somebody should have been here, actually, yeah.
I agree.
Oh, they were invited. They're always invited,
They're always invited.
so.
We'll have somebody here in September, or we'll ask. Mr. Brown?
Just when they do come to legal fees, you can see they said in the explanation of variances they had additional legal fees. The question I would have is why?
Exactly.
Is it something that is going to continue? We have to worry about next budget, or we having a bad year? And also, on the town lists the lawyers, and also why we're having, what these lawyers are working on. And I don't think it would be such a bad idea to take a look at the same type of schedule that the town gives us.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Can I make a motion to postpone this item to the next scheduled Board of Finance meeting?
Yes. It's only a discussion item, so we
Okay.
can put that back on. We're not voting on anything, so we can definitely we'll put it back on the agenda, and we'll make sure that they're there. Please go through the items such as you have, and let's make sure we have our items so that they'll know exactly what we want to follow up on. And again, this is year end, so this gets discussed a couple different times. Okay? Any other questions, comments, or concerns on this item? All right, let's go to, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mayor and have him review the town's financial budget or position at the end of the fiscal year.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, couple of comments before I go into the numbers. I mean, there's a couple of constraints to operate under here. One is having not been involved in the establishment of the agenda, or the annual agenda, the calendar, I guess is a better word, with the Board of Finance. The timing of this, obviously, is right after the close, so we don't have the most time to do a full, thorough analysis by department, by object code. There's 25 different departments. There's, I don't know, 1,000 object codes. Two, I don't personally have a full understanding, and I'm hoping this will be a discussion when we go down to set the calendar for next year. I don't have a full understanding of, what the board would exactly like. There was, like, the year-end one, kind of like Mr. Walsh saying earlier, the budget minutes maybe should have a little bit more elaboration. Maybe the year-end, budget analysis have some greater elaboration with attendance by the various department heads where there's significant differences from budget, et cetera, to talk about their departments. So that's something that I'd be looking to talk with you guys about in preparation for next year, or maybe even for a September report or something like that. So that's just an opening comment.
Okay.
And Mr.
Can
Walsh has his hand up.
I follow up with Mr. Mayor? I think that's a good idea to discuss, Bob. I think, number one, are our books closed yet, or is accounts payable still open?
Accounts payable is still open.
When does that stay open until?
Well, another couple of weeks anyway. Maybe
Couple of
another
weeks.
week.
I mean, one of the questions I had going through this, and especially, I look back at last year's when we did this meeting in July, is whether this meeting should be more towards the end of August, I guess, after accounts payable closes. I just didn't know, maybe there's a reason why we just do it every quarter on the quarter, but, it might, I guess what I hear you say, Mr. Mayor, it might be kind of nice to hear an end-of-the-year report once the books close.
Yeah, I'm saying that if we have the final and we have time to actually look at it by department, by object code, or by object code by department, whichever way you want to attack it, because you can attack it either way, and you identify, of course, this year's a skloogy year, if that's even really a word, because everything is kind of buried in FEMA, right? I mean, look at all of my excuses. I mean, this is FEMA, FEMA, FEMA. But that way, but if we had more time to analyze by department, and then you might be appropriate to have, you know, Jerry here for a park and rec issue, DPW here for an issue, conservation here for an issue. I don't know, but that's thoughts that I had you guys might want to talk about.
Well, there's a couple things. I don't think it's a bad idea. The question is, how much time, when would it be? And the second question is, and I'll ask Ms. Bossi, when are the books truly closed? Because the audit opinion isn't issued until the December timeframe.
December
right?
timeline, yes, sir.
Right. So, I mean, they're still, you know, when do they finish field work, really? Because once they finish field work, there's not adjustments, right? I mean, that's going back to my audit days. Field work is kind of no more adjustments after field work is done. I don't know if that's still the case.
Yeah, but then there's audit adjustments that they pass on clearly when they finish their audit in December.
So, okay, audit adjustments that they pass on, meaning adjustments that they waive?
Some are passed, as we went through last year, and some are not. Some are government-wide entries, which we don't actually make, but some, you know, do we know the bulk of them? If
Right.
not 99.9% of them, probably in
Right.
October, November, yeah.
Right, that's what I'm trying to, so the timing, because it's always going to be, obviously, the more time we allow between June 30th and whenever we have this meeting, the better for quote-unquote accuracy of the numbers. But there comes a point when you're actually looking at information that's so far in the rearview mirror that it's history, it's no longer actionable. So if in fact there's an action to be taken or a concern to be had. So the question is, what is the happy medium between complete accuracy, quote unquote, that you're not going to have till December, and timely and accurate enough so that if there's a concern on fund balance or something like that, we can know about it sooner rather than later. So, you know, what's your guidance on that? I mean, we don't have to decide that tonight, but we definitely, before we set the calendar, we got to come to a happy medium on that. Do people understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes. And that's, I guess I'm trying to get to the same point, Tom, and you know, you being a CFO and Bob and being a CPA and Caitlin being the controller, that's the question I have. I'd like to get some information sooner.
Right.
But I don't know whether I feel like the need to have field results done by auditors yet. I mean, that, to me, that's the audited results. So I'm wondering whether, is there a time period after the books are kind of technically, AP is the last thing that closes down? After AP, some churning time to let you guys sift through after the books are closed. An August 30th, September meeting, so something like that where, at least from the town's perspective and our Board of Finance, where we're still close enough to the end of the year where we could at least kind of have some idea on how the year went.
Right.
And I guess that's kind of I'm open to a date too, but I wouldn't want to wait till November. I'd rather it be the end of September, beginning of October, no, the end of August, beginning of September, if that's enough time for your department.
Yeah, because you could justify dragging this out all the way.
Yeah, I have no intention or desire to do that.
Right.
And let me also make clear, I don't think it's inappropriate to have an early run like this. You know,
We used to call it a flash
I
report.
think it's kind of cool. You know, it makes sure that we're focused, we get the numbers down, gives me a sense of where we are and what's going on. So it's actually helpful from that perspective. What I'm saying is, in addition to, this is the beginning, and then I was thinking personally, and Caitlin and I have not had an opportunity to discuss this, but I personally was thinking sometime around the end of August timeline, but I will know better this year what is the best timeline, whether it's the end of August, early September, certainly not beyond that, I wouldn't think, no. Yeah.
As long as we get the head, I'll speak for myself, as long as we get a preliminary report of any hot button items, which quite frankly you should know about big items, over the summer months, anything that we need to react to, I personally am okay at waiting to that time frame to hear a full-blown, you know, report after accounts payables closed and you've had times to do a scrub, you know, a pre-audit, you know,
Yeah.
what the numbers
Right,
are.
and plus, there's, from my perspective, you know, I don't feel I'm the best person, if there's something that is going on in DPW or something's going on in Parks and Rec, you know, I think it's more appropriate, at least when I sat on your side of the table, I didn't want to hear from the CFO, I wanted to hear from from the department head who could, really give, pertinent information.
Mrs. Leclerc?
Yeah, Linda Gardner used to do a nice little summary for us. She used to contact each department head and have them review their budget and then get back to us with a little summary of why their overtime was high or what was going on in each.
Yeah.
And then they would give us a little booklet, and that helped a lot and
Yeah.
didn't require the department heads to come to our meeting.
No, I'm just saying, no, I understand. And you have a little summary, quotes and little, in this handout.
Bullet points.
But is
You
it
have-
from
you have 20.
it's not from the department heads explaining?
Yes.
It is.
Yes, department heads are included in the
Okay,
discussions.
okay.
Okay. Why don't we come back to us with a date? Let's make sure we consider that when we do the calendar for next year. Is anybody just fundamentally opposed to doing that? No. Yeah, you guys?
I also think, Tom, just as a little side note, it gives this board a chance to have vacation time and make sure, I mean, everyone's here tonight, which I think is great, but there could be chances people could be on vacation.
How dare they?
I know. So it might just give more time to
Sure.
do it like early September to give everybody a chance to get back hitting the ground.
Okay. That's very fair. Anybody else have anything? Anybody disagree with that? All right, Mr. Mayor, walk us through. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that the revenue numbers are, well, let me back up a couple seconds. I think when we presented the third quarter variance analysis, we made the statement that we did not show a variance analysis for tax collections because we had a reconciliation problem, not a problem, but the town is used to reconciling its tax collections with its books at the end of the year rather than throughout the year. And, with that's being taken care of and been fixed, and Caitlin's done an excellent job on that. But, so we did not address the general taxes, current year taxes at that time. But if you look at the page, the revenue page, these numbers, I think, are probably real close to what the final will be. General taxes, the main difference there is, I wasn't involved in the budget last year, but the tax collection was budgeted last year at 98.47%, and our collection rate is coming in at 98.87%. And that's about $700,000 difference, plus we had interest revenue favorable of about $400,000. The favorable activity in license and permits is primarily in the building department. I think everybody's aware that there's been an incredible amount of activity in the building department as a result of people doing renovations and restorations from Storm Sandy. I don't specifically know why the health department revenue is up, and Linda is here, and I don't know if she knows or not. And the activity in conservation I paid, the activity is just down there. It's lower activity, and, that's just, people aren't being active. Then we have the favorable variance in the municipal revenue share, which was a new program, the video competition. These are state revenues that came in higher than were budgeted. Some of them weren't really a surprise, but they were budgeted where they were budgeted. Town clerk recording fees.
Can we stop right there for 1 second, just while we're
Sure.
there? The municipal revenue share, was that because we budgeted for a specific share of state revenues or something, and then we got
let me-
increased for some reason, or can you just explain to me what?
Cut up to the table, Ms. Gardner, please.
Hi, Jim. That was a line that supplanted the manufacturing grant and some others. It was a one-time line. They were removing other state revenues, and this was a place to help make up or hold us harmless. It's actually a new line. And I'll just mention that when we set our budget for revenue, especially state revenue, we're setting it prior to the final state budget.
Yeah.
So we may have, not picked up the final state revenues, and this
There's
is why
some
you're seeing it.
volatility there, yeah.
Yeah, when the, thank you. Do you mind just stay there? When the state budget was being, worked on in Hartford, that we monitored this closely because they were moving numbers around as to this year. But last year, they also moved some numbers around. So there was, like I said, that was, the municipal revenue sharing program was budgeted at 0, and it came in at 469. The video, I think everybody was surprised by that. That's the program that this is 13, fiscal year 13 was last year, and, we got the first 2 checks, and it was like, whoa, this is more than we budgeted for. But I'm not sure, I have no idea why. I don't know if anybody else does or not. So
It's a relatively new grant, isn't it? So it's been very difficult to estimate what that's going to be, as I recall.
But I think it's expired as well.
Yeah, it went, and now it's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, these are pretty, and then with respect to town clerk recording fees, we're up $152,000, and the conveyance taxes are up approximately $95,000. Beach stickers, a big surprise, but we talked about this actually during the third quarter, up $70,000. But obviously, those were offset by, Penfield activity. It was down because that wasn't rented out for several months. Those are the kind of like the big items. We had unfavorable parking police violation revenue, item number 6 there under fines, $70,000.
Stand for a second.
Yes, sir.
So we lost money on Carl Dickman and we lost money on H. Smith Richardson. Is that right? Is that what that's saying?
No,
Offset by
we didn't
unfavorable?
get as much revenue.
Right.
Oh, right, okay. We're below revenue plan. Got it.
Yeah, the Par 3 fees came in at negative $35,000.
Yeah.
Smith Richardson's came in at negative $98,000.
Let's go, item number 7.
But,
This was something that I know that we were very concerned about in prior years, this happening, the mark-to-market of our investment. How much did we lose on that?
We had a terrible fourth quarter. Because if you remember, at the end of the third quarter, we were positive.
Yeah. And that's simply marking it to you say here that it's mark-to-market. Is it really, did we lose on interest, or is it actual evaluation based on mark-to-market at the end of the year of our investments?
The latter.
It is actually the mark-to-market. And what was the downward adjustment on that?
Bingo. The actual mark-to-market adjustment?
Had to be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah. I'm looking at, like, Westport Resources was like $150,000. The Bovina contract or account was 100. Yeah, so the fourth quarter, I don't know what the annual number was.
Yeah.
But I looked at the last quarter, and yeah, we took.
Well, are you adjusting, are you marking it to market now each quarter?
Yes.
Okay, so we were, lack of a better way, artificially high at the end of the third quarter, and then we're mark-to-market low at the end of the fourth quarter.
Right.
So we're seeing these large volatility. And what investments are the ones that are causing that?
Well, it's when I said investments, basically I was mentioning there the 2 larger mark-to-market accounts, Westport Resources and an account with a broker with Wells Fargo.
What are those investments in, do you recall?
You know, they're fixed income investments. They're agency funds, they're muni funds. And as we know, actually, to talk a little bit about cash management, as you remember, you guys have directed me to, do something. And I started out really strong, if you maybe remember, maybe not, gave a presentation on my great plans, and then budgets and union contracts and other things got in the way.
Right.
But I was actually hoping to send out an email today, but I didn't get to it. I'm hoping, this is an early alert, not this coming week, but I think the 14th and the 16th for the investment committee. If those are those 2 dates, but I'm going to send an email out tomorrow morning.
Okay.
I have 2 dates. I'm hoping to have, I'm not fully there yet, but I'm hoping to be there by that time. I won't be fully there, but I'll be there with, I think, enough information that will interest you to kind of let you know what I'm doing intimately and what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
So and I'll get that email out tomorrow.
Thank you for that. Mr. Brockfeld, did you have a question or a follow-up? No, okay. All right.
You were just on number 7, right?
I was, my apologies.
Can we go back to number 5?
Sure.
Explain to me what this miscellaneous revenue items are, because I'm saying that
Basically,
town clerk was supposed to get 200,000, and they got 7805.
here's my understanding of this, that was a catch-all at one point, where they put lots of miscellaneous revenue items in there, and Linda can correct me, obviously, if I'm wrong. And then what happened was the miscellaneous ones were spread out, but, so it was budgeted twice.
Yeah, that's what it looks like happened, because all of a sudden these other departments all pop up with zeros, and all of a sudden there's all these revenue amounts.
What happened is when we budgeted the aggregate amount against the majority of it against town clerk.
Where's the revenue come
And a little
from?
bit of it in finance, but it really should be spread among all departments. It's for revenue that you don't anticipate for perhaps making a copy of a check or something in the
Oh, okay.
finance department. Things that you can't project.
So like
And we just lumped it or
Okay.
aggregated it against one department.
So that's like if somebody came in the town clerk's office, they paid $1 a page, and
Right.
that income came in. So they actually made 7805 as opposed to $200,000.
We did a careful analysis of it for the 14 budget, and you can see that we
Okay.
adjusted it.
Thank you.
So, the discontinued funds one, that's another intriguing one. And Caitlin can speak to that better than I, but that's primarily when you close out a capital fund, you have excess funds left over, because you might borrow or anticipate X number of dollars to be expended on a capital project or some other kind of special revenue fund or something, and then you close it out, you have money left over, so you fold it in. This is something we should be able to estimate pretty closely, actually, if we go forward-looking, but that's just, there just weren't any,
Is there a reason where the $100,000 went?
yeah, there just wasn't any discontinued funds.
But we must have been estimating it to be the 145. Was that like
Yeah.
for a specific school project? I'm asking whether it's for a
That's what I'm
specific
saying.
project.
It should be, but it wasn't. It was basically based upon historical.
So it doesn't get broken down. When we budget the $145,000, we don't break that down by specific projects or anything else like that? We just guesstimate it and just say it's going to be
No, but there's two
145,000?
accounts in the discontinued funds area. There's sale of town-owned property,
Sale of town-owned
which is
property?
different, which is surplus cars and old cars and police cars and fire trucks that
Mhm.
we sell, actually. And then there's the surplus from discontinued funds. I don't know what the budget, if we budgeted that for 14 or not, but there's two distinct, very different pieces to this discontinued funds section. And the $1,200, just to give you a feel for what this type of account was used for, was we received money from the state from a project that's over 15 years old. So we dumped it into this surplus from discontinued funds, because I don't even have that fund on my books any longer. And the 38,000 in the actual for sale was just what I said, cars and equipment that we sell at auction.
Forgot about that half. Thank you.
It's on, are you seeing on page
I'm seeing
5
the
or 6?
75,000 we budgeted for the surplus from discontinued funds.
Oh, yeah, but go back to page 5 is the other line.
Yep, and I saw the other one for the 38, we had $38,000 for,
Two combined make up the 145 budget.
okay. Okay. And what were you saying was on the page 6 at the top, what was that amount, the 1,230, 238 was some?
Check from the state that we received on a fund that was closed out about 10 or 15 years ago.
Okay.
For a smaller project. They must have gone back and did an audit or something.
Okay, and why did we think we were going to get 75,000? Just historically? That was just a number that's plugged in there historically? We always put $75,000 in there?
You know what it's going to be next year? Is it? We reduced it. That's what I thought. Is it a zero budget line in 14? Do you know? Okay. That's very close to zero.
I think
Okay.
that's my recollection.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I have on that one.
All right. Continue, Mr. Mayor.
So, obviously, the bond premium, budget 20 million, we actually got 2.9, but we're only booked 320 into the general fund. The remaining is sitting in the debt service fund and will be used to offset future debt service payments.
On the most recent bond sale, was there any premium?
273?
So we have $273,000 that's unexpected, that's coming into the budget for the 14 year?
Right,
That's nice.
right.
Do we know how we're going to use it?
We're going to reduce our debt with it.
We're going to use it what?
Reduce debt.
Okay.
Yeah, ideally, that's what you should do with bond premium.
Yeah.
You should work it against debt.
No, I just wanted to know, because we've sometimes used it for other
Yes, well, it's...
things,
Yeah,
specifically in the last year or two.
Yeah,
Okay. So it's all going to be used for reducing debt?
that would be my recommendation, yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. We want to go on to the expense side?
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of these we've discussed in prior quarters, but some are new, and some I just don't understand. I don't know others.
Yeah. And again, with another week, we would have more, but let's discuss them.
Let's, the one that jumped out at me was, the first one was contingency. So this is the unused contingency.
Contingency does not get recorded against until September.
That's what I
When the
thought.
Board of Finance
Does the transfers.
does the transfers. One of the things I wanted to do was actually calculate what the number would have been and have it for you tonight, but we didn't get to that, and I apologize for
Yeah.
that.
No, and in finance, okay, you're running well under here, although the explanation is mostly overage, so I'm assuming what this under is, did we not make the contribution to the surplus yet?
That's correct. That's not included in this.
And that's how much?
500,000.
That's what I thought. So in actuality, you'll be over by about $39,000 in this account.
Correct.
I'm not even sure, though, accounting-wise, Tom. I think I just let that fall to the bottom. I wasn't even going to expend it in that.
I know what you're saying, because we
Budget.
put it in the budget, and do you even need to, or it just
We
falls through?
gave you a budget with zero actual against it, so it would fall to the
It's going to fall to
surplus by
surplus
default.
anyway.
So I wasn't
Yeah.
anticipating making an entry out
Talk
of
to
this.
talk to the auditors about it, because the only problem there is then we should change the way we're budgeting it.
I think we.
Did we change the way we
I think we changed
budgeted
it.
it?
We took it out of finance for next year, didn't we?
We might have.
I think we created a new department for contribution to surplus.
We talked about it.
We didn't do it?
I think that's for next year.
The 675? I thought we moved it somewhere.
I don't think it's in finance.
I'll look. I don't think it's in finance either. I think we moved it out.
I know
This
that was a
reason, probably.
discussion. don't know whether it was done or not, but however it gets recorded, I mean, you're right, it ends up at the same place in surplus, but it's obviously a variance that we don't want to continue to report
Yeah.
against.
I think we will do it on finance.
Yeah, I had difficulty with that in the third quarter when I was trying to do my variance analysis. You got this $500,000.
You don't have to do anything with it, it's
Yeah.
going to fall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So does that mean that it will end up as a net
It's a
negative,
net
unfavorable variance?
In operating, yes, because you have, basically the net here is 460,960.
Yep.
Okay? All things being equal, we had $500,000.
Mhm.
That's included in the 1,476.
Yep.
That has not been recorded in the 1,015,015.
Yep.
So if you look at just pure finance operations, you've got a negative of roughly
$40,000, yep.
$39,000.
Yep.
So we'll fix that with with a journal entry.
Right, but it's still, and that overage in
Yeah.
that department is largely the
The CFO move.
Okay.
Can I ask
Yes,
a
Mr.
couple questions earlier?
Yeah,
Yes,
com-
Mr.
combined
DeWitt,
with,
and then I'll go to Mr. Walsh.
Combined with the union contracts,
Okay,
because they were finalized and the raises came through.
got it. Mr. DeWitt, and then I'll go to Mr. Walsh.
I want to jump to the big one, which is Public Works operations. So, looking at the budget, and I know it's not final, right? Overtime, huge. Overtime, 2 line items, huge. And then really huge overrun on contracted services. Which the only reason I'm bringing it up is because there was a discussion in the budget this year, why the gentleman proclaimed very proudly that we had really done a great job of getting contracted services in, but it appears as if we're still spending a lot of money.
Remember, all the FEMA costs are still included in here, so
Yeah.
they're not
There's,
offset.
basically, the.
Okay, the FEMA, we recovered $2.54 million from that other.
We haven't covered anything yet.
No, but it's in your overview sheet.
But it's not in, it's right, it's at the bottom. It's not on this line item.
No, I get it,
Right.
but.
So
but
if you just.
I gotta.
Chris, just a second, please.
Go ahead.
Good, thank you. The Public Works outside purchases amount was rated directly to FEMA, $1,580,104.04. The overtime directly related to FEMA, $161,764.83. Overtime fringe benefits for DPW related to FEMA, $12,375.01.
So what is that budget overrun if you
So-
take those numbers out?
So that, if you add up all those numbers, that's 2 point something. I didn't bring a calculator. 1.6 plus 1.6 million plus 161,000 is 1,761, 201. So it's like 2,150,000 bucks or something.
So that's going to clear. So that budget will
What we're
be
going
clear.
to do is actually, I think, Kate and I have discussed this, but I'm not sure we came to total closure on it. The thinking of the moment is we're going to set up in each account that had FEMA expenses, we're going to set up a revenue account. And the FEMA reimbursement amount that comes back related to the expenditures for that account will come into those accounts, those departments as revenue. And then we'll have the expenditures in there so that in each department we'll end up with showing the net FEMA impact.
So there'll be a line item that says revenue
I'm not
for.
sure.
or,
I mean,
yeah.
we'll certainly know the numbers and we'll
Right.
make the entries. And like I said, Caitlin and I have talked about it, but we haven't come, because it does take a little bit of extra work to do that kind of thing, and.
So who's getting
that's really
FEMA money?
Caitlin's-
So Public Works, Fire, and Police? Is that pretty much it?
Well, the biggest one is Public Works.
Yeah, because you've got 2.69. You got 2.65, and you just said it was 2.1. So at least about
I'm going to give you
550,000.
some totals, and the totals, if I can read across this damn thing, would make me happier. But building, 174,000. Conservation, 38,000. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
210, right?
5. Finance, 128,000.
330.
Fire, 404,000.
So right there, your number doesn't work.
Well,
That's
I don't know what you mean by
$700,000.
my number works. Human Resources, 46,000. The grand total FEMA billing is 3,824,000.
Your summary here says 2.65.
That summary is the current ballpark estimate of the dollars that we will get. What I'm giving you is the total expenditures and build amount.
Oh, those are what was expended because of the storm,
Correct.
not what we're recovering. We're recovering, what,
Correct.
80%, is it? 75%?
75%.
Okay.
Minus
Yep.
some stuff.
Great. I'm going to go to Mr. Walsh, who's been waiting. Thank you, Mr. DeWitt.
Just a couple of questions. This report's changed over time.
I think this
Correct.
report changes every time I give it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just a couple of stylistic things and questions about what goes into it, I guess. Number one, at the title of the expense report, the zeros should probably be removed because you actually go to actual dollar amounts as opposed to going out to thousands.
Got that right.
Let's hope so.
Well, register of voters, I didn't know was $244 million. That
They're
kind of
mostly
threw me off right
unfavorable-
from the beginning.
Since they're mostly unfavorable variances, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
If
And I was
that's the
wondering
case,
whether-
Roger's buying next time.
And I was wondering whether we could have year-to-date percentages in here, as has been done in previous reports, including the famous mayor report in its previous version. It would just help, I think, to identify. Now, not every department, when you go through here, is put onto this report. How do you make a decision about what gets on this? Is it based on the percentages, or is it based on a dollar amount?
What department did we miss?
Well, let me just give you an extreme example, but it's just one that when I first started comparing the actual, all the data. You pick up the register of voters percentage, because it's 6% over for the year. The total amount's $15,000. The next department after that, Zoning Board of Appeals, which is only at 53.3% of their budget, but it's a variable of a positive $3,000. So when you go through this, do you do it based on where the variances are, based on a percentage basis? Or is it do you have like a specific dollar cutoff? Like if it's below 10,000, I don't put it on here. If it's, obviously there's $15,000 numbers on here. So I guess that's a question, because I guess as a board member, when I'm looking at a variance report, what am I supposed to be keeping my eye on? Is it a dollar amount, or is it a percentage basis that we're off? And I guess, and Linda, this is a really good discussion to have, because I guess it should be this board that determines what they want to see.
Right, absolutely. In this case, I did it based on a dollar amount.
Mhm.
The only reason why I included registrar of voters is because even though the dollar amount was small, I wanted to call your attention to the primary that wasn't funded, because the understanding was it was supposed to be carried in contingency, but then the contingency got wiped out. So it kind of tied in with that, and I just thought I'd like to separate out that explanation,
Okay.
even though the dollar amount wasn't significant.
And I don't know how everybody else feels. I mean, I just think, I think we should have some consistency in what we're looking at in this report. And to me, I guess maybe dollar amount should be it, but.
Yeah, Jim, I want to interrupt you a little bit, and go back to my earlier comments. We basically ran the June 30 pre-close Friday morning, and we did this Friday.
Okay.
To get the best available information.
The best
that is
available information.
But
Going back to my earlier comment, it would be, two comments, actually. One, sitting down and having a decision, a dialogue about what everybody really would like, and B, when it should be delivered. In other words, if we gave you this report, or a report, it might not even be this report, if it was a week from now. But given the timeline of the activities, the work flow, et cetera, You know, we basically kind of knew where we were going, we knew what we wanted to do, but we had to constrain that by the timeline that we had to do it.
Let's handle it this way, because I think this is, Mr. Mayor, you're in the position now. You've created new reports for us to view virtually each quarter. It's been kind of an iterative process as people have become more comfortable and people have settled in. I think it's an excellent point that the board should provide some direction. A couple, maybe 4 years ago, we had a, quite frankly, I think we called it the report subcommittee, which was looking at developing reports that we wanted to see in conjunction with the new financial system. That committee, quite frankly, didn't do all that well. What I would propose, as opposed to trying to hash it out tonight, is that we assign a subcommittee of board members to meet with Mr. Mayor, to meet with Caitlin, and decide what reports for this type meeting should look like, whether we want them by percentage, whether we want them by dollar, and then come back and present to the board what their recommendation is. And I think that's probably the best use of our time, and would actually provide some direction to the finance team. Does that make sense?
Yeah, total. And one of the goals was to improve a little bit on last year, whereas last year's year-end report, basically, there was differences identified in 7 revenue accounts and 8 expense accounts, and then with some selected information, dollar information, without any dialogue or
Right.
explanation.
Right, it's been
So-
iterative. The
So-
dialogue and explanation happen at the meeting, actually, but you're
Yeah.
right. The formats of these reports seem to change each time.
Right.
And I think it's now, we've got a handle on it enough.
Yeah.
We've seen different iterations of it.
Yeah.
So now it's time to actually formalize it and say, this is what we want to see moving forward.
Yeah, I
People
think-
agree?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
And I would like to say, in complimenting you, Bob, I think the reports have actually gotten better, to be quite honest with you, because it allows you to look at a high level, but yet have the immediate information there that if you want to go down into the weeds, can quickly go by that department down into the weeds by the munis reports that are provided. So I just think that, yeah, there's just got to be some consistency in
Yeah,
what we see.
What I'd like to do personally, I think, would do a report, and this is what you guys have to drive a little bit, but I think my first thought process would be to do it by object code, i.e. salaries and wages, fees and, contract services, and then drill down by department. Or you
Let-
could do it by department and drill down by object code. I just kind of like,
That's why we're going to have a committee.
yeah, but, and then you could, but you'd get it both ways.
Yep.
Just how do you want to do the drill down?
Any other questions on the expenditure report such as it is? And remember, it's going to change. I do have one. Board of Finance. All right, I understand, the one question I have is more the audit. I get the clerk thing, but then it says here, audit and stipend for clerk, not budgeted. We damn well budgeted the audit, and I know we budgeted it.
the stipend for clerk wasn't budgeted for year end.
No, I get that, but I'm talking about the audit. Okay, how much higher did the audit come in and why?
$3,000 or something.
Why?
I think they did some extra work.
to use the mics?
Yeah.
$3,000? I think there was, I'm not certain about this, but I think it's about $3,000. I think there was some extra work that was done.
Can we check on what that was related to?
Yeah,
Just because
yeah.
I know we're pretty tight on the budget going forward, so I just
Yeah.
want to make sure we don't have an issue there.
Yeah.
Because I thought what we had budgeted was what the contract was, what the agreement was.
Probably did, but I think there was some extra project that
That was
came in
in
at $3,000.
And it was separate. Thank you, though. All right. What else on expenses? Anybody? All right, do we want to go to the summary page right now? Yet another different format, I think?
It's a summary page.
Yeah. The year-end summary.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
labeled
summary
year-end
page. The
summary. It's
summary
not-
page.
Yeah.
I can't find it. I have a mess in front of me. There we go. Yeah. So, yeah, the revenue that we talked about, the 1.7, that's going to be pretty close, I believe. The expenditures, that's what it was as of Friday morning. Then we have anticipated closing entries. I think there's about $800,000 in encumbrances right now, and we're anticipating that 500,000 of that will end up being closed out. Then we have increase in the tax refunds accrual. Remember, that was something that we recorded last year for the first time. It was 575. That number is going to come in about 800,000 this year. Accounts payable processing. What Caitlin and I did is we just said, how much do we spend every year and how many days do we have left, and divided. It is not a very scientific number. It is a purely calculated number. So that would give us, if these numbers turned out to be anywhere near what happens, a $44,000 positive variance. We have not established the receivables for FEMA yet at this time, and we'll know in the next couple of weeks. We'll have a better handle on what these will be, but I think these are safe numbers. We'll come in at the 2.4 million for Sandy, about 250,000 for Nemo, which gives us a total budget surplus of anticipated estimated, 2.694 mil. Mr. Walsh?
So I just want to be clear.
Area, I know.
I just want to be clear, the stuff for FEMA, because I just wasn't sure from looking at this report. That's estimated receivable. That's not money that we received in, correct?
We have not received any money for Sandy.
All right. Just as a recommendation, it might be helpful, at least it would definitely be helpful for me, because I was about to blow a horn saying, this is great, we got our first check, this is great. That somehow we either put, number one, that it's estimated, and number two, that it's either receivable or expected or something else like that, because I just thought that was money we might have received.
What we do have is information from FEMA, again, another document that you'll see next time we talk about this, is where we've gotten feedback back on what their number is.
Okay.
And I wanted to put a schedule together that shows what that total is. I just didn't quite finish it today.
So are these numbers on the conservative side, or?
I think so.
Okay, great. My last question, I guess, would be on this, is in that middle section, anticipated means estimated closing entries, correct?
Thank you. Yes, sir. Better word. I like
Okay.
that. Yes.
But those three areas that you have there, if we moved out this meeting, as we talked earlier in these reports, out to, say, the end of August or beginning of September, how many of those numbers would probably go away and we'd have more definitive answers on? All of them?
All of them.
Okay. And just another reason why this report could be more accurate if we just maybe worked on timing. So, okay, thank you.
Let me put this into context, if I could, just so I understand. The numbers up above, particularly the expenditures number, which ties to the number on the page behind it in my package.
Good.
This includes expenditures that we had for FEMA, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, so including all the expenditures for FEMA, we basically were at all the expenditures that we made, FEMA-related or not, right, storm-related or not, we're basically at a balanced budget, if your estimates are accurate.
Well, not on the expenditure side.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, the 40, yes.
Right.
Not expenditures, but yes.
So
'Cause
that
you have
means
1.7
that
million.
means that essentially our entire, if we have a surplus, our entire surplus would be made up of FEMA-related reimbursements.
Yes.
Right, so. Which went away. So, okay, thank you for that, because, so basically what you do is you take that 694, you subtract out 500, so you're at 2,194,000, right?
Right.
So here's, and I don't know that this is answerable, and quite frankly, I don't know that we want to answer it right now, okay? But my question would be, how much of the expense that we're getting reimbursed from FEMA is actually incremental versus allocatable?
It's all allocatable. By department, you mean?
I know it's all allocatable. How much of it is incremental?
I'm going to answer that question, I think. We are billing them for the $3.8 million number I mentioned earlier. That's not the billing, that's the grand total that's subject to FEMA reimbursement.
No, I get it.
Okay. Of that grand total, let me do this very quickly. 430, 541, 750, about $750,000 was not incremental.
750 was not incremental. So if I take 2.2...
Maybe 800.
Okay, let's say 800. So if I take 800 out of 2.2, that means that true cost savings versus budget, everything else being equal, was 1.4 million to the good. And of that 1.4 million to the good, 1.761 is on the revenue side.
Correct.
And if I go back, the 1.761 was largely related to the collections rate.
Yeah, about 791,000, I think, was my,
So about half was the collection rate.
right.
And the rest was, so basically, all our upside this year was based on revenues being higher than we anticipated due to a better collection rate, more state grants, and higher fees related to conveyance and things like that, correct? Based on best available
What
information.
about the $500,000
What?
that we were putting into surplus in the budget? What's that?
That got eaten up by the additional expense, but it's being reimbursed through FEMA. So basically where we're at is we're 1.4 to the good.
Mhm.
And of that 1.4, 700 is tax rate.
Yeah, this year's tax rate, in this curve, this year, the 214 budget is at the 98.85.
So we don't have that cushion.
You don't have that cushion.
Do you, everybody understand?
Yeah.
I understand. I have a question, though. And what it is we approved funds for FEMA, for the storm Sandy that were bonded. And I want to know how much of that we spent and what's still available and,
We haven't spent any of that yet.
okay.
I mean, well, that's not quite accurate. We're spending money on architects and engineering and filling in beaches, but we haven't, most of it has not been spent. I mean, the bulk of it is not. And I do not have a reconciliation at this time. That was $5,155,000, of which $468,000 was cushion amount, so you're down to like 4.6. 1 million of that was Penfield, so you're down to like 3.6. And there's going to be, of that we bonded for, top of the head number here, at least, no, not at least, I'm saying, given today's understanding of the numbers and FEMA's interpretation of our billing and our insurance program, we will, there's a potential of that 515 minus the cushion 468 that we will not get about $850,000 or $900,000 of that.
And that's an additional reimbursement from FEMA separate than this 2.6?
Yeah, the numbers that I've been talking about today are specifically the A and B category numbers,
Yep.
which are recurring operational expenditures.
Right.
The 5.1 mil is the C through G category numbers, and
Which are one-time based on,
correct. Correct. Like, for example, some of the things, like that we have in there, like, I think it's $70,000, just to pick one example, for, I think, the Southport concession stand, which floated away. We don't believe at this point we're going to get any money for that. We are currently trying to, there's about $200,000 in beach replenishment that's certainly in question. The Penfield, we probably, there's $500,000 of that 1 million that's our responsibility because it's our reinsurance, our insurance deductible. So there's a couple other numbers in there.
So when you have 2.4 here, that is just operating costs
That is just the
reimbursements?
reimbursement of the operating course, yes, Mary.
So separate than the reimbursement.
Separate,
of the-
okay.
Right. That's another reconciliation document that we're real close to getting this kind of together.
Okay.
And one of the things we have preliminary notice that our biggest project worksheet, which is $1.6 million for debris, has been approved. But I'm not sure what the total approved is. I think our approved numbers, no, let me back up. FEMA has certified as FEMA has worked on 2.7, no, notice the return, this isn't the, this is not broken down. Brought that, I didn't.
By the way, the
FEMA
general, go ahead.
I'm sorry. FEMA has approved about $2 million in reimbursements that we think is finalized, out of about 2.7, I think, that we of submittals.
By the way, on the revenue item, back to that, the general tax number is 1.2 with 400,000 of it being
The interest,
interest.
correct.
So if that didn't happen, and we had this is back to the issue we've had on the investments, the mark-to-market could have negatively impacted our balances. I mean, it did negatively impact it, but it could have actually shown something if we didn't have such upside in the collection rate, which, by the way, we don't have this year.
We also had the tax sale, too.
Exactly. Yeah, for the 400. Yeah.
Well, we actually only sold one property, and a lot of it was last year.
Yeah, but the interest is this year.
No, a lot of the activity was last year. Last year.
There was a lot in July and August. We came out of July and August far ahead, as I recall, of last year, yeah. All right, any other questions on this?
Yeah.
Mrs. Leclerc?
Sorry, I just have a question on the money we expect back from FEMA. Do we have an estimated time date when we'll receive that?
I have no idea.
No idea. Okay.
And I
and-
ask that question weekly, at least.
Okay, good. I'd like to hear that. And then another question is, how is this estimated receivable going to be reflected? Is it going to be accrued on our financial statements that we expect to receive this and show the bottom line number? Or are we more on the cash, for budget purposes, we're cash, so we're at the 44,
What I'm
right?
going to do, Mary, is credit back the general fund for the 75%.
Okay,
And move it over to a grant fund, and then record the receivable over there, and record the expenses over there. So when the revenue comes in, it's not going to touch general fund, it's going to go straight to the grant fund.
okay.
But to Bob's point earlier, we want to take all of the FEMA numbers out of the budget so it doesn't skew our actuals
Right.
in our history. So what we want to do is maybe move
Journal entries.
the 25% to, he keeps calling it a revenue account, but it's really an expense account, within each department, to take it out of all of the operating budget lines so that it doesn't skew the actuals.
Okay.
So the comparisons, you can compare
So
apples to
year over year,
apples.
it'll be the same.
And you can have this one offset down at the bottom, it makes sense.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, that makes sense.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, we're done with this item. Any other communications that I am unaware of? Seeing none, we're good for now. Do I have a motion? Mr. Brockfeld, Mr. Bolito, all in favor? Those opposed? Thank you, everybody. Long evening.